He kissed another woman in the backseat of his own car while his wife stood 15 feet away, watching through the rain-streaked glass of a coffee shop window. Ronan Vex thought he owned the world. He thought he owned her. What he didn't know was that the quiet woman he'd been humiliating for 3 years was the only daughter of the most feared man in the underworld, and she had just decided to end him. If you want to see how a forgotten wife buries a mafia king without ever raising her voice, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop the name of the city you're watching from in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels tonight. The rain came down hard over the east side of the city that Thursday night. The kind of rain that made the streetlights bleed into the pavement and turned every windshield into a smeared painting. Iris Vex sat in the back corner of a coffee shop on Marwell Avenue, a cup of black coffee going cold in front of her, and watched her husband park his black Maserati across the street. She had followed him there. That was the part she kept turning over in her head, the part she couldn't quite forgive herself for yet. She had followed her own husband like some sad, suspicious housewife from a made-for-TV movie, and now she was sitting in a stranger's coffee shop with her hair damp and her hands too still in her lap, waiting to see something she already knew she was going to see. The woman got into the passenger seat first. Long legs, red coat, hair the color of wet gold. Iris didn't recognize her, but she recognized the way Ronan leaned across the center console to kiss her. He kissed her the way he used to kiss Iris, back when he still pretended, back when he still bothered. The kiss lasted a long time, long enough for Iris to count the seconds, long enough for the barista behind the counter to glance at her twice, the way strangers sometimes do when they sense something quietly terrible happening at a nearby table. When Ronan finally pulled away, he was laughing. He said something to the woman in the red coat, and she threw her head back and laughed too, and Iris watched her husband's hand slide up the woman's thigh with the easy confidence of a man who had done it 100 times before. Iris didn't cry. That surprised her a little. She had expected to cry. Instead, she lifted the coffee cup to her lips, took one slow sip of the cold, bitter liquid, and set it back down on the saucer without a sound. Her hands, she noticed, were perfectly steady. "Are you okay, honey?" The voice belonged to a waitress, a woman maybe 50, with kind eyes and a name tag that said Donna. Iris hadn't even heard her approach. "I'm fine," Iris said. Her voice came out soft, ordinary. The voice of a woman who folded laundry on Sundays and kept a grocery list on the refrigerator. "Thank you." Donna hesitated. "You want me to top that off for you?" "No, thank you." Iris managed a small smile, the kind that was really just a polite bending of the mouth. "I'm leaving in a minute." Donna lingered for a second longer, glanced toward the window where the Maserati was now pulling away from the curb, and then walked off without saying anything else. Some women, Iris thought, could read a room better than any man alive. She sat there for another 10 minutes after the car was gone, and in those 10 minutes she made a decision. Not a dramatic one, not a vengeful one, just a decision, the way a person might decide to sell a house or change careers or stop going to a restaurant they used to love. She was going to leave him, and she was going to take everything with her when she went. The penthouse on the 42nd floor of the Verona Tower was quiet when she got home. It was always quiet. Ronan liked silence in his house the way other men liked trophies on their walls. It made him feel powerful, like the world itself had learned to hold its breath around him. Iris hung her wet coat in the entryway closet, kicked off her heels, and walked barefoot across the marble floor to the kitchen. She poured herself a glass of white wine. She drank half of it standing at the counter, staring at nothing. Then she went into the office. The office was Ronan's. Everything in the penthouse was Ronan's, in the way everything in a cage belongs to the man who built it. But the office was especially his, a long dark room with leather chairs and a desk the size of a small car, and a wall of books no one had ever read. Iris had been in this room maybe a dozen times in 3 years of marriage. Ronan didn't like her in here. He said it distracted him. Tonight, she sat down in his chair. She pulled open the bottom drawer of his desk, the one he always locked. She had copied the key 2 years ago, the second month of their marriage, when she'd first started to understand the kind of man she had agreed to live with. She hadn't used the copy yet. She had been saving it for a night like tonight. Inside the drawer were files, contracts, ledgers, a burner phone, a thick black notebook with handwriting she recognized as Ronan's, slashing and impatient, full of names and numbers and abbreviations that wouldn't mean anything to a normal wife. Iris was not a normal wife. She opened the notebook and began to read. She read for almost 2 hours. Somewhere around the 90-minute mark, she got up, refilled her wine glass, and came back. She did not rush. She did not take photographs. She didn't need to. Her memory had been trained from the time she was 11 years old to hold pages of numbers and names the way other children held nursery rhymes. By the time she closed the notebook and slid it back into the drawer, she knew exactly how much money Ronan Vex had, where most of it was, who he owed, who owed him, and which of his lieutenants were already quietly unhappy. She locked the drawer. She put the key back where she had hidden it, taped to the underside of a ceramic vase in the hallway that Ronan had never once touched. She walked back into the kitchen, finished her wine, and rinsed the glass. Then she went to bed. Ronan came home at 3 in the morning, smelling like perfume that wasn't hers, and slid into bed beside her without a word. He didn't touch her. He hadn't touched her in 4 months. Iris lay with her eyes closed and her breathing even, and she counted very slowly from 100 backwards. By the time she reached 0, she had the first 3 moves of her exit mapped out in her head. In the morning, she made him breakfast. She made him eggs the way he liked them, soft in the middle, with toast and black coffee and a single slice of orange on the side of the plate, because that was the way his mother used to serve it when he was a boy. And it was the one small thing that had ever made him look at Iris with something close to gratitude. Ronan ate at the island, scrolling through his phone, not looking at her. "I'm going to see my cousin in Westbrook this weekend," Iris said. "I told you last week, just so you remember." Ronan grunted. He didn't remember. He didn't care. "I'll be back Sunday night," she added. "Fine." She watched him eat. She watched the muscles in his jaw work. She watched the way he turned the phone face down when she came too close, the way he always did now. And she felt, for the first time in months, something almost like pity. "Ronan." He looked up. His eyes were tired and beautiful and completely empty. "What?" "Nothing," she said. And she smiled at him, a small, warm, wifely smile. "Have a good day." He grunted again and went back to his phone. She did not have a cousin in Westbrook. Yeah. The lawyer's name was Marguerite Hales, and her office was on the 30th floor of a glass tower in the financial district, and she had been waiting for Iris's phone call for almost 6 months. "I wondered when you were going to come in," Marguerite said, closing the door of the conference room behind them. She was a tall woman in her 60s with iron gray hair cut short and a voice like a cello. "Your father said to expect you eventually." "My father says a lot of things." "Your father is usually right." Iris sat down across from her at the long glass table. "He told you?" "He told me enough to be ready." Marguerite set a black folder in front of her. "I've had the framework drafted for a year. All I needed was your signature and your timing." Iris looked at the folder. She did not open it yet. "I don't want him to know," she said. "Not until it's done." "He won't." "I don't want to fight." "He won't get one." "This isn't a divorce, Iris. This is an excision." Marguerite tapped the folder. "By the time he notices, there won't be anything left to argue about." "And the prenup?" "The prenup he made you sign?" Marguerite smiled very thinly. "He drafted it assuming you were an ordinary woman from an ordinary family. The man who reviewed it on your behalf is a friend of your father's. He left 7 openings in that document big enough to drive a truck through. You'll walk away with everything you came in with, plus a considerable amount of interest." "I don't care about the money." "I know you don't, but taking it from him matters, Iris, for him, not for you." Iris was quiet for a moment. She looked out the window at the gray winter sky, at the distant line of the river, at the city that had been her cage for 3 years. "Okay," she said. "Start." What followed was the most invisible thing Iris Vale had ever done in her life. Over the course of the next 4 months, she built her exit the way a watchmaker builds a watch, piece by tiny piece, with a patience that almost didn't feel human. She moved money, not all at once, not in ways anyone would notice, but slowly, in small legitimate transfers to accounts her father had quietly opened for her years ago in countries whose names Ronan had never learned to pronounce. She transferred ownership of small things, a car in her name, a piece of property in the mountains, a collection of jewelry that Ronan had given her as apology gifts after each of his worst nights. She sold what she could discreetly sell. She stored what she wanted to keep. She kept making his eggs the way he liked them. She kept folding his shirts. She kept smiling when his mother called on Sunday afternoons and asked, in that bright, brittle voice, whether there would be grandchildren soon. "Oh, someday," Iris would say. "We're in no rush." Ronan would be sitting across the room, scrolling through his phone, not listening, and Iris would smile into the receiver like a woman who still believed in her own life. She met her father twice during those 4 months. The first time was in a small Italian restaurant in a town 90 miles north of the city, a place with red check tablecloths and an old jukebox that played the same Sinatra record over and over. Darius Vale sat in the back booth with his hands folded on the table, and when Iris walked in, he did not stand up. He never stood up. Standing up, her father had told her once, was something you did for people who outranked you, and Darius Vale did not, as a general rule, consider anyone to outrank him. "Sit down, Piccola," he said. She slid into the booth across from him. He looked older than the last time she had seen him, a year and a half ago. His hair had gone almost completely white. But his eyes were the same, dark, patient, terrible. "You look thin," he said. "I'm fine." "You look thin, Iris." "I said I'm fine, Papa." He watched her for a long moment. He had the gift, her father, of being able to look at a person until they forgot whatever lie they had been planning to tell. "He hit you?" "No." "Iris." "He didn't hit me, Papa. He's not that kind of stupid." Darius made a low sound in his throat, somewhere between a grunt and a laugh. "Well, that's something at least. It means I won't have to take my time." "I'm handling it." "I know you're handling it. That's the only reason he still has both his hands." Darius picked up his glass of red wine, turned it slowly between his fingers. 3 years, Iris. You gave that man 3 years of your life. I gave that man 3 years so you and he wouldn't go to war. I would have gone to war. I wouldn't have minded." "I know you wouldn't have minded, Papa. That's why I did it." He set the glass down. He looked at her the way he had looked at her when she was 9 years old and her mother had just died. And he had come into her bedroom and sat down on the edge of her bed and told her, very calmly, that she was going to have to grow up faster than other girls. "You still think you saved lives?" he asked. "I know I did." "And now?" "Now I'm done." He nodded slowly. "Tell me what you need." "Nothing from you, not yet. When it's time, I'll tell you." "Iris." "Papa, let me finish this my way. I've earned that." He was quiet for a long time. Then he reached across the table and put his hand over hers, and for a moment he did not look like Darius Vale, king of a kingdom nobody admitted existed. He just looked like a father. "Okay, Piccola," he said. "Your way." Buon. The second meeting was shorter. It was 6 weeks later in a parked car behind an empty warehouse at the edge of the harbor, and her father handed her a manila envelope without speaking. Inside were photographs of 3 of Ronan's lieutenants. Names, addresses, weaknesses. One of them had a gambling problem. One of them had a brother in prison he was trying to get out. One of them was simply tired, the way men sometimes got tired after spending too many years pretending to respect a man they didn't. "These 3, Darius said, "when the time comes, they'll turn." "You're sure?" "I've been working on them for 8 months." "They don't know who they're working for yet. They think they're working for themselves. That's how the best ones always think." Iris slid the envelope into her bag. "Thank you, Papa." "Don't thank me. This is the family business." She opened the car door to get out. "Iris." She paused. "When you do it," her father said, not looking at her, looking straight ahead through the windshield at the black water of the harbor. "Don't do it in anger. Anger is for small men. You understand?" "I understand." "Do it like you're doing paperwork." "Yes, Papa." She closed the door and walked away, and by the time she reached her own car, her hands were trembling, just a little, for the first time in months. Not from fear, from something closer to anticipation, from the feeling, very particular and very rare, of a long job finally beginning to move. Ronan's mistress's name was Celeste Monteith, and she was 26 years old, and she worked as a hostess at a restaurant on the west side that Ronan part-owned but pretended not to. Iris knew all of this by the second week of her planning. knowing it had been almost embarrassingly easy. What was more interesting was what Celeste didn't know. She didn't know that Ronan had two other women on rotation besides her. She didn't know that one of them had gotten pregnant 8 months ago and that Ronan had paid her $40,000 to make the problem go away. She didn't know that Ronan kept a list of women in the Notes app on his second phone, ranked by a system Iris had found almost funny in its crudeness. Celeste probably thought she was special. Celeste probably thought Ronan was going to leave his cold, quiet wife and marry her someday. Iris did not hate Celeste. She couldn't quite get there. Celeste was, in the end, just another woman Ronan was using, and it would have felt small and petty and beneath her to waste anger on a girl who didn't understand she was already disposable. Still, when the time came, she would make sure Celeste was part of the package that went down. That was not revenge. That was tidiness. The night before she left, Iris cooked dinner. She cooked osobuco, the way Ronan's grandmother used to make it, the recipe he had given her during their engagement when he had still been the kind of man who gave her things. She made it from scratch. She braised the veal for 4 hours. She set the table with the good china, the wedding china, the plates with the thin gold rim. Ronan came home at 9:30, smelling, as always now, of someone else. He stopped in the doorway of the dining room. "What's this?" "Dinner." "I ate." "I figured." She smiled at him from across the table. "Sit down anyway." He hesitated. For a moment, something uncertain flickered across his face. The smallest, faintest recognition that something in his house was not quite as he had left it. Then it passed, and he sat down, and he reached for the wine without asking. "Good day," Iris said. "Fine." "Anything interesting happen?" No. She watched him pour himself a glass. She watched him drink half of it in one swallow. "Ronan." "What?" "Do you remember our wedding?" He looked up at her. His eyes were dark and a little glassy from whatever he had been drinking before he got home. "Of course I remember our wedding." "What do you remember about it?" "Iris, what is this?" "I'm just asking." "I remember you wore a white dress. I remember my mother cried. Jesus Christ, what do you want from me right now?" "Nothing." She took a small sip of her wine. "I was just thinking about it earlier." He looked at her like she had grown a second head. Then he shook his head and went back to his wine, and Iris watched him across the table, and she understood finally, completely, that the man sitting across from her had no idea who she was. Not the smallest, faintest idea. He thought she was a wife. He thought she was a room in his house. He thought she was something he had bought, and therefore something he could afford to lose. Iris smiled at him, very gently. "Eat something," she said. "I made it for you." She left at 4:15 in the morning. She had packed one small suitcase. Almost everything she owned, she was leaving behind. The clothes, the jewelry he had given her, the photographs, the shoes. She wanted nothing that had been his. She wanted nothing he could point to later and say that was mine. In the suitcase were 3 things: her passport under her real name, a leather folder containing the final signed documents from Marguerite Hales, and a single photograph of her mother that she had kept hidden inside a hollowed-out book for 3 years. She stood in the bedroom doorway for a moment and looked at Ronan sleeping. He was beautiful. She had always thought so. He had a cruel mouth and dark lashes, and a jawline that looked almost drawn, and in the soft gray light coming through the window, he looked like a boy. A stranger, watching, might have thought she looked sad. She wasn't sad. She was something else. She was emptied out. She was the quiet that comes after a room has finally finished echoing. "Goodbye, Ronan," she said softly. He didn't stir. She closed the door behind her and walked down the hallway and rode the elevator 42 floors to the ground. And when she stepped out into the cold, dark morning, there was a black car waiting for her at the curb. The driver was a man she had known since she was 12. He had taught her how to drive. He had taught her how to shoot. He had stood at her mother's grave holding an umbrella over her head in the rain. "Miss Vale," he said, opening the back door for her. She stopped. She almost laughed. She hadn't been called that by anyone but her father in 3 years. "Tomas," she said, "it's good to see you. It's been a long time. Too long." She slid into the back seat. He closed the door gently. He got in and started the engine, and the car pulled away from the Verona Tower without hurry, and Iris Vale watched the penthouse shrink in the side mirror until it was just another set of lighted windows in a skyline she would never see again. She did not cry. She never cried. Ronan noticed she was gone around noon. He had woken up at 11, hungover, and had been annoyed that there was no coffee brewing. He had shouted for her. She hadn't answered. He had assumed she was at the grocery store, or at yoga, or at one of the small, pointless errands that wives seem to invent for themselves to fill the empty hours of their empty days. By 1 o'clock, he was more annoyed. By 2, he called her phone. It went to voicemail. He tried again. Voicemail. "Where the hell are you?" he muttered, and then he let it go because he had a meeting at 3, and Iris was, in the end, not worth the attention. She didn't come home that night, or the next. On the third day, Ronan came home and found her closet empty. Not ransacked. Empty. Every hanger was still in place. Every shelf was dusted. The drawers had been folded shut. It was as if she had never been there at all. He stood in the middle of the empty closet and stared. "Iris?" His voice echoed in the apartment. He called her phone. It was disconnected now. He called her mother's old number. Disconnected. He called the number he had for her father, that old, fragile family number she had given him once in the first year of their marriage. Disconnected. Something cold moved up his spine. He told himself it was nothing. He told himself she was upset about the girl. She must have found out about Celeste, somehow. That was all. She was throwing a tantrum. She would come crawling back. Women always came back. They always did. They got lonely, or they ran out of money, or they missed the lifestyle. And they came back with red eyes and a script about how sorry they were, and how they would try harder, and how they just wanted to be wanted again. He poured himself a drink. He sat down on the leather couch. He waited. She did not come back. 2 weeks later, his lawyer called him. "Mr. Vex," the lawyer said, in a voice that sounded, Ronan thought, strangely strangled. "I need you to come to my office immediately." "What happened?" "Sir, I think you should just come in." He went. He walked into the lawyer's office at 4 in the afternoon, and he sat down across the desk, and the lawyer slid a stack of papers toward him with a hand that trembled slightly. "Your wife has filed for divorce," the lawyer said, "so let her file." "Sir, she filed 4 months ago." Ronan went very still. "She filed 4 months ago," the lawyer repeated, "in a court 1,500 miles from here, under laws that your prenuptial agreement has no jurisdiction over. By the time we were notified, the window to contest had already closed. The divorce was finalized 11 days ago." That's not possible. "Sir, I've reviewed the paperwork. It's airtight. I've never seen anything this clean in my entire career." Ronan stared at him. "What do you mean clean?" "I mean, she didn't take anything she wasn't legally entitled to. I mean, every signature is in order. I mean, she walked out of this marriage with her assets, her property, her name, and approximately $12 million, and there is not a single thing we can do about it because the documents were executed with a level of precision that I would describe professionally as terrifying." $12 million. "Yes, sir." "From where?" "From you, sir. From holdings in your name that she was apparently a registered partial owner of. I don't know how she got onto those documents. That would have required her to be present at the original filings, and I have no record of. I signed those papers 3 years ago, during the wedding week. She was there. Ronan stopped. His mouth had gone dry. She had been there. She had been there, in her pale blue dress, with her pen, signing things that he had told her, affectionately, not to worry her pretty head about. She had laughed about it. "You can read them if you want, Iris." No, just tell me where to sign, darling." He stood up slowly. "Find her," he said. His voice had gone flat, almost gentle. "I don't care what it takes. Find her." The lawyer swallowed. "Sir, about that." "What?" "I already tried, yesterday. I used our usual people. The ones we use when we need to locate someone who doesn't want to be located." "And?" "And they came back this morning and told me they would not be continuing the search." "Why not?" "They didn't say, sir. They just said that they would not be continuing, and that I should advise you, respectfully, to not pursue it through other channels either." Ronan stared at him. Who is she? He said softly. He was not asking the lawyer, he was asking the heir. The lawyer said nothing. That night, Ronan sat alone in the penthouse he had once shared with her, and for the first time in 3 years, he tried to remember her. Not the shape of her, not the softness of her, not the small particular things of daily life. He had those. He had those with embarrassing, unwanted precision. The way she held a coffee cup, the way she tucked her hair behind her left ear before she read, the way she said his name when she was trying not to cry. No. He tried to remember her, who she had been before him, where she had come from, what she had said in that first year when he had asked her about her family, and she had given him soft, blurry answers that he had accepted because she was beautiful and quiet and easy to own. My father is a businessman. What kind of business? Nothing interesting. Shipping, mostly. Shipping where? Oh, Ronan, you don't want to talk about my father. What tatum? And he hadn't. He hadn't wanted to talk about her father. He hadn't wanted to talk about anything. He had married her because she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen in his life, and because she had looked at him that first night with an expression of such calm attention that he had mistaken it for love. He understood now that it had never been love. It had been study. She had been studying him. For 3 years she had been studying him the way a scientist studies an insect pinned to a board. And he had let her. He had handed her the pins. Ronan poured himself another drink. His hand was shaking. Who the hell are you? He whispered into the empty room. Who the hell are you, Iris? The only answer was the sound of the wind against the 42nd floor windows, and the distant hum of the city below, and somewhere, 1,500 miles away, the sound, although he could not hear it yet, of a black car moving through the dark toward a house he had never seen, where a man he had never met was waiting on the front steps to welcome his only daughter home. But Darius Vale was standing on the stone porch of the old house on Holloway Ridge when the headlights came around the bend in the long gravel drive. He had been standing there for an hour. He did not want to sit. A man, he felt, should meet his daughter on his feet. The car came to a stop at the foot of the steps. Thomas got out first and opened the back door, and then she stepped out. His girl, his only girl. And for a moment Darius Vale, a man who had not cried in 41 years, felt his throat tighten in a way he did not recognize at first. She walked up the steps slowly. She stopped on the step below his. Papa? Iris. She did not throw her arms around him. She had never been that kind of daughter, and he had never been that kind of father. Instead, she put her hand flat against his chest, over his heart, the way she had done when she was a very small child, and she looked up at him with those dark, unflinching eyes that were her mother's eyes, exactly. I'm home, she said. I know you are. He covered her hand with his own. It was cold. Everything about her tonight was cold. Her skin, her fingers, the air she brought in with her from the long drive. But her eyes were not cold. Her eyes, he noticed, were burning. Are you all right? He said. I'm fine. Iris. Papa, I'm fine. I'm better than fine. He looked at her for a long moment. He had known her for 31 years. He had watched her learn to walk on these same porch steps. He had watched her lose her mother and not cry at the funeral because she had been too young to cry in public and too old, even then, to cry in private. He had watched her walk into another man's life 3 years ago with her chin up and her hands steady and her back straight, and he had told himself, that night, that if anything ever happened to her, he would set the city on fire. Nothing had happened to her that she had not allowed to happen. He understood that, now, finally. He understood that his daughter had walked into that marriage on purpose, with a plan, with a strategy, with a timeline, and that she had walked out of it the same way. He had raised, he realized, something more dangerous than he had ever been. Come inside, Piccola, he said softly. Your room is ready, and tomorrow morning we'll begin. Begin what? He smiled, just a little. The rest of it, he said. She walked past him into the house. She did not look back. In the warm yellow light of the foyer, her shadow stretched long across the polished wood floor. And for a moment, just long enough for a man to feel it in his bones, Darius Vale thought his daughter's shadow looked like a crown. He turned and followed her inside and closed the door behind them, and far away, in a penthouse, on the 42nd floor of a glass tower in a city that had not yet learned her name, a man sat alone with a shaking glass in his hand and tried, for the first time in his life, to understand what it was he had thrown away. He did not understand yet. He would. The old house on Holloway Ridge had not changed in the 3 years she had been gone. That was the first thing Iris noticed as she stepped into the foyer behind her father. The same long hallway with the dark wood paneling. The same oil portrait of her great-grandfather hanging above the fireplace in the sitting room, his eyes following her the way they had followed her since she was 5 years old. The same smell of cedar and old books, and faintly, her father's cigars. What had changed was her. She stood in the middle of the foyer for a long moment, suitcase at her feet, and let the house look at her. Houses did that, she had always believed. They studied the people who came back to them. They decided whether to forgive the absence. "Rosa made up your room," her father said behind her. "Same as always. She put fresh flowers on the dresser. She was baking bread at 11 o'clock at night, Iris. The woman is 68 years old, and she was baking bread at 11 o'clock at night because she heard you were coming home. I'll go find her in the morning. She'll find you first." Iris almost smiled. Rosa had been the housekeeper at Holloway Ridge since before Iris was born. She had been the one who had brushed Iris's hair every morning after her mother died, because Darius, for all his terrifying competence in every other corner of his life, had not known how to braid a little girl's hair and had been too proud to learn. "Papa?" "I need a week." Darius looked at her. He was standing in the doorway of the sitting room with his hands in his pockets, his white hair catching the low yellow light of the chandelier. "A week for what?" "A week to sleep, a week to breathe, a week to remember who I am before we start." He studied her for a moment. Then he nodded. "A week," he said. "Not a day longer." "Thank you, Papa." "Don't thank me, Iris. I'm not being generous. I'm being smart. A soldier who goes into a war tired is a soldier who loses it. I won't lose it." "I know you won't. That's why I said a week." He walked past her toward the staircase. He paused at the bottom, one hand on the banister, and looked back over his shoulder. "Iris." "Yes." "The boy." "What boy?" "Vex. The boy." She waited. "I want you to tell me something," her father said, "and I want you to tell me the truth, because I will know if you lie to me. Did he ever put his hands on you in a way that I need to know about?" Iris was quiet for a long time. She thought about the answer. She had made a decision, months ago, about how to answer this question when it came, and she had rehearsed the answer, and now, standing in the foyer of her father's house at 1 in the morning, with her suitcase at her feet and her whole life behind her, she changed her mind. "Once," she said quietly. "Last year. He grabbed my wrist at a dinner party. He didn't hit me, but he squeezed hard enough that I couldn't move my hand right for 2 weeks." Her father did not move. He did not speak. He simply stood there, his hand on the banister, and for a long moment Iris watched her father's face become the face of the man the rest of the world knew, the man whose name made grown men stop drinking mid-sip in restaurants on 3 continents. Then very slowly he let out a long breath, and his face became her father's face again. "Okay, Piccola," he said. "Go to bed." "Papa?" "Go to bed." She picked up her suitcase and walked up the stairs past him, and she felt his eyes on her back the whole way up, and she understood, with a small cold certainty that would have frightened another woman, that she had just signed something she could not unsign. She did not regret it. She went into her old bedroom at the end of the hall and closed the door behind her and sat down on the edge of the bed, and she cried, finally, for the first time in 3 years. She cried quietly, the way she did everything, with her hands pressed flat against her knees and her face turned toward the window. She cried for about 4 minutes. Then she stopped. She washed her face in the bathroom. She changed into a soft gray nightgown Rosa had laid out on the bed. She climbed under the covers, and she slept for 14 straight hours. And when she woke up the next afternoon, the crying was done and it was not coming back. The week passed slowly. Iris walked the grounds in the mornings, the way she had walked them as a girl, down to the old stone wall at the edge of the property, out to the woodshed her grandfather had built, around to the little pond where her mother had once tried to teach her to fish and given up in laughing frustration after 2 hours. The leaves were turning. The air smelled like cold water and wood smoke. She walked and she remembered. And slowly, piece by piece, she felt the last 3 years falling off her shoulders like a coat she had been wearing too long. She ate 3 meals a day. Rosa, weeping quietly and pretending not to, fed her as if she were 6 years old again. Bread, butter, fresh tomatoes from the garden, chicken soup that tasted like the last time Iris had really been warm. "You're too thin, mija," Rosa said, standing over her at the kitchen table on the third day, hands on her hips. "What did that man do? Starve you?" "He didn't starve me, Rosa. You are too thin. I do not want to hear any excuses. Eat." "Yes, ma'am." "And your hair?" "What about my hair?" "It is dull, dull like a dead thing. Tomorrow you will let me do a mask for it." "Yes, ma'am." Rosa put a hand on the top of Iris's head very gently and stood there for a long moment without saying anything. Then she muttered something in a language Iris did not quite catch and went back to the stove, and Iris sat at the kitchen table and ate her bread and tried not to let anyone, not even Rosa, see the way her hands were trembling, just slightly, for the first time that afternoon. The trembling had started on the second day. It came and went. Not fear exactly. Something more complicated, something that felt like a body slowly remembering that it was allowed to feel safe. She did not like it. She wanted it to stop. On the fourth day, she went down to the long room at the back of the house, the one her father called his library, and that everyone else in the family called, more accurately, the office. She locked the door behind her. She sat down at the oak desk that had belonged to her grandfather. She opened her laptop, and she began, very quietly, to work. By the end of the week, when her father walked into the room, without knocking, and set a cup of black coffee on the desk beside her, she had already built the first 3 moves of what was coming next. Darius looked at the screen. He looked at the legal pads covered in her precise, slanting handwriting. He looked at the map of the city pinned to the wall behind the desk, the map she had spent the last 4 days marking in 4 different colors of ink. "You've been busy," he said. "I told you a week. I said not a day longer. You took 6. I took 6.5, Papa." He sat down in the leather chair across from the desk. He picked up one of the legal pads. He read it slowly, the way he read everything, without moving his lips, his eyes traveling line by line down the page. "Tell me," he said. She told him. She talked for almost an hour. She did not raise her voice. She did not gesture. She simply sat in her grandfather's chair with her hands folded on the desk in front of her, and she walked her father, step by careful step, through the collapse of Ronan Vex. It would start with the shipping lanes. Ronan owned, or believed he owned, a controlling stake in 3 freight companies that moved goods through the eastern ports. He did not realize, he had never bothered to realize, that 2 of those companies had been quietly leveraged against debts he had forgotten about, debts that Iris had been tracking for a 1.5 years. When the moment came, those debts would be called in simultaneously by 3 different creditors who did not know, and would never be told that they were all working from the same orchestration. Ronan would lose the first freight company in a week, the second in 10 days. The third would survive, but only on paper, and only long enough for him to pour his last reserves into propping it up, which was exactly what Iris wanted him to do. Then the nightclubs. Ronan owned 4. 2 of them were laundering money at a scale that would not survive serious scrutiny. Iris had already identified the federal auditor who was going to be assigned to review them. She was not going to bribe him. She was going to make sure he was given, anonymously, through a journalist she had known at university, a single document that would turn what might have been a standard audit into a very long, very public investigation. Then the lieutenants. Her father had 3 of them already halfway turned. Iris had identified 2 more who could be turned, given the right leverage. She walked her father through their weaknesses one by one, and she did not flinch when she described, for example, the man whose 15-year-old daughter had a drug problem. Her father had been secretly paying rehabilitation clinics to conceal. That man, Iris told her father, would not need to be threatened. That man would need only to be offered the quiet, permanent solution to a problem he had been carrying alone for 2 years. "And Ronan himself?" Darius said. "Ronan we leave alone." He raised an eyebrow. "We strip him," Iris said. "We take everything he has, every business, every ally, every man who's ever called him boss, but we don't touch his body, we don't touch his freedom, we let him live." "Why?" "Because dead men stop hurting, because men in prison become heroes, because the only thing worse for a man like Ronan than dying is having to walk down a street in his own city, and watched strangers not recognize him. Her father looked at her for a long time. "Piccola," he said finally. "Yes, Papa." "Whose idea was that?" "Mine." "Not your mother's." "My mother's been dead for 22 years, Papa." "I know, He stopped. He cleared his throat. He looked at her with something that, on any other man, might have been called amazement. "I just wanted to make sure, because for a minute there, Piccola, you sounded like her." Iris did not answer. She looked down at the legal pad in front of her, and she did not trust her voice for a full 30 seconds. And when she finally looked up again, her father was already on his feet, walking toward the door. "Start Monday," he said over his shoulder. "Monday. Monday. I'll put the word out tonight that you're home. By tomorrow morning, half the city will know. By the end of the week, Vex will know too. Let him feel it coming, Iris. Let him sweat for a few days before you close the door." "Yes, Papa." He paused at the door. He did not turn around. "Iris?" "Yes." "I'm proud of you." She sat very still in her grandfather's chair. She watched the door close behind him. She had waited 31 years to hear him say that. She did not cry, but she put her hand flat on the desk and she kept it there for a long time. And she breathed slowly in and out until her chest stopped hurting. The rumor moved through the city the way her father had said it would. It started small, in the right rooms. A whispered conversation in the back booth of a steakhouse where old men with old names ate dinner every Thursday. A quiet aside in the locker room of a boxing gym that had been a front for something else since 1962. A sentence spoken, low and fast, between two men waiting for their cars at a hotel valet stand. "Darius Vale's girl is back." The sentence moved. It picked up weight as it moved. By the second day, it was no longer a rumor exactly. It was a piece of information that men were passing to other men with the specific, careful caution of people handling something that could change their lives. Darius Vale's daughter is home. The only one. The real one. I thought she was dead. She wasn't dead. She was hiding. Hiding where? You don't want to know. Nobody wants to know. It's over now. Within a week, a man in a camel-colored overcoat sat down across from Ronan Vex in the private back room of a restaurant on the east side, and he slid a glass of whiskey across the table, and he said very quietly, "Ronan, we need to talk." The man's name was Victor Linero. He was 60 years old, and he had known Ronan's father for 40 years, and he was the closest thing Ronan had ever had to a mentor, which was to say that he was the only man in the city that Ronan Vex was still, at 36 years old, a little bit afraid of. Ronan did not pick up the whiskey. "What?" he said. "Your wife, Ronan." "My ex-wife." "Whatever." Victor waved a hand. "The girl." "What about her?" "Do you know who she is?" "Of course I know who she is. She's Iris. She was—" "Do you know who her father is, Ronan?" Ronan went still. He had been trying, for 11 days, not to think about this question. He had been telling himself that the lawyer had been exaggerating, that the people who refused to look for her had refused for boring reasons, not terrifying ones, that his wife, his quiet, ordinary wife, had simply gotten lucky or gotten expensive help, and that was the end of it. He had been telling himself a lot of things. "Her father," Ronan said carefully, "is in shipping." Victor Linaro closed his eyes. He kept them closed for a long moment. When he opened them again, he looked, Ronan realized with a small cold shock, like a man who was about to deliver very bad news at a funeral. "Her father," Victor said, "is Darius Vale." The room became very quiet. Ronan did not move for perhaps 15 seconds. He sat with his hand halfway to his glass, his fingers not quite touching it, and in those 15 seconds, a great many things that had not previously made sense to him became very suddenly clear, and he understood, in a single sharp moment, that he was a dead man. He was not a dead man in the literal sense. Not yet. But he was a dead man in every way that had ever mattered to him, because the life that he had built, the empire he thought he had, the name he thought he carried, all of it was about to be taken apart by a woman he had called baby and sweetheart. And once, when he had been drunk and angry about something she had long since forgiven him for, a useless cow. "That's not possible," he said. His voice came out strange, not his own. Ronan? That's not... Victor, that's not possible. Darius Vale doesn't have a daughter. Everybody knows Darius Vale doesn't have a daughter. Everybody knows what Darius Vale wanted everybody to know. He had a daughter. He hid her. He sent her to schools in 3 different countries under 3 different names. He brought her home when she was 23, and 6 months later she was married to you. She came to me. We met at that gala. She was sent to you, Ronan. No, she was sent to you to keep the peace. Your father and Darius Vale had been at war for 20 years. When your father died and you took over, Darius decided the smartest thing was to bind the families together. He sent his only daughter into your house, and he told her to keep her mouth shut for however long it took. And she did it, Ronan. She did it for 3 years. Ronan was not breathing. He was aware that he was not breathing. Why are you telling me this? He said. Because nobody else is going to, Ronan. Because everybody in this city who knows is already backing away from you, and the ones who don't know are about to. And in a week you will not have one single man left who is willing to be seen in public with you. I'm telling you this because I owed your father a debt, and this is me settling it. And after tonight, Ronan, I cannot help you. Do you understand me? I cannot help you. I have grandchildren. Ronan put his hand flat on the table. He looked at it. It was trembling, a fine, fast tremble that he could not stop. What do I do? He said. You run. Where? I don't know. I don't want to know. Somewhere far, somewhere small, somewhere you're not you anymore. I can't run. I can't. Victor, I have businesses. I have people. You have nothing, Ronan. You just don't know it yet. Ronan looked up at him. Victor was already standing, already pulling on his coat. Victor, no. Victor, please. I'm sorry, Ronan. For what it's worth, I liked your father. He left. Ronan sat alone in the back room for a long time. He did not drink the whiskey. He did not move. The waiter came in twice to check on him and both times backed out without saying anything. After about an hour, Ronan took out his phone. He scrolled through his contacts. He stopped on her name. Iris. The number had been disconnected for 12 days. He knew that. He had called it 7 times. He called it again. It rang. That was the first thing that was wrong. It had not rung in 12 days. It had gone straight to a recorded message that said the number you have dialed is no longer in service. Now it was ringing. It rang 4 times. Then it picked up. Hello, Ronan, she said. Her voice was exactly the same, soft, unhurried. The voice of a woman setting a plate in front of him. The voice of a woman asking him if he wanted more coffee. He could not speak. Ronan. Iris, how are you? How am I? He laughed. It came out wrong, high and broken. Iris, Jesus Christ, Iris, what have you done? I haven't done anything yet. That's not what Iris, listen. Ronan. He stopped. I'm not going to talk to you long, she said. I picked up the phone because I was curious about one thing. I want to ask you one question. Will you answer me honestly? Iris, will you answer me honestly, Ronan? Yes, fine, what? She was quiet for a moment. In the background of the call, very faintly, he could hear a clock ticking. When you brought her into our bed, Iris said softly. The second time. The woman in the red coat. Not the first time. I've let the first time go. But the second time, Ronan. When you knew I'd seen you the first time and you brought her into our home anyway, to the bed I slept in, because you wanted me to know. I want you to tell me, Ronan. Why did you want me to know? Iris, I didn't... Don't lie to me, Ronan. I'm asking you a simple question. I'm giving you a chance. Why did you want me to know? There was a long silence. He opened his mouth. He closed it. He thought about every possible answer, and he knew, with the new cold clarity that had come into his head in the last hour, that every possible answer was a lie except for one. Because I was bored of you, he said. The words came out of him before he could stop them. They came out flat and simple, the way a confession does when it has been waiting inside a man too long. Because I was bored of you, he said again, quieter. And I wanted to see if I could make you angry. I wanted to see if there was anything in there, Iris. I wanted to see if you'd fight. Jesus Christ, Iris, I just wanted you to do something. I did do something, Ronan. I know. I did something very large. I know. Goodbye, Ronan. Iris, Iris, wait, please. Goodbye. She hung up. He sat with the phone pressed against his ear for almost a minute after the line went dead. He sat in a back room of a restaurant on the east side of a city he had thought he owned, and he listened to the dead air on the other end of the line, and he understood finally in his bones that the last 3 years of his life had been happening to a man who did not exist anymore. He put the phone down on the table. He started very quietly to cry. No. Iris set her phone down on her grandfather's desk. She looked at it for a long moment. She thought about whether she had said too much. She decided that she had not. Then she stood up, walked to the window of the library, and looked out at the grounds. The sun was going down. The light on the stone wall at the edge of the property had gone the color of honey. A knock at the door. Come in. Her father opened the door. He looked at her face and then at the phone on the desk, and he did not ask what had just happened. He never had to ask. There's someone here to see you, Iris, he said. Who? Adrian Cade. She went still. Adrian's here. He arrived half an hour ago. I told him to wait in the sitting room. I haven't spoken to him yet about... He gestured vaguely. About anything. You didn't ask me if I wanted to see him. No, Piccola, I didn't. She looked at her father. He looked back at her with an expression she could not quite read. Papa? I know, Iris. I'm not ready. I know. I am not asking you to be ready. I am asking you to come downstairs and say hello to an old friend of this family, because that is what you owe him, and because he has come a long way, and because it is polite. Nothing more. The rest can wait. She held his eyes for a moment. Then she nodded. Fine, she said. Give me 10 minutes. 10 minutes. He closed the door behind him. She stood alone in the library for a long moment, and she thought about Adrian Cade, and she thought about the last time she had seen him, which had been 8 years ago, at a wedding in another country, when she had been 23 and he had been 27, and he had asked her to dance, and they had danced, and he had said nothing the whole time, except, at the very end, your father's arrangement is fine with me, Iris, but if you ever want to say no, you can say no, and I'll make sure he lets you. She had never forgotten that sentence. She walked down the long hallway and down the staircase, and she paused at the bottom to smooth her hair, and then she pushed open the door of the sitting room. He was standing by the fireplace with his back to her. Adrian. He turned around. He was older. That was the first thing she noticed. He had been 27 when she had last seen him, and he was 35 now, and the years had put some weight on his shoulders and some silver at his temples. He was tall, taller than she remembered. He had a hard, weathered face that should not have been handsome but somehow was, and he had gray eyes that had not changed at all in 8 years. Iris, he said. He did not move toward her. He did not smile exactly. He looked at her for a long moment, and then he inclined his head very slightly in a gesture that could have been a nod or a small bow, and he said, You look well. I look tired. You look well anyway. She almost smiled. She didn't, not yet. Sit down, Adrian. He sat down on the couch. She took the chair across from him. The fire was burning low in the grate. Rosa had, as always, put out a tray of coffee and small dry cookies that neither of them touched. Why are you here? Iris said. Your father called me. When? 3 nights ago. Why? He told me you were home. He told me he wanted me to come and see you before the... He paused. He chose his words. Before the work started. He thought we should speak first. Alone. Before anything else. And what did you say? I said I would come. Just like that. Just like that. She looked at him for a long moment. Adrian? Yes. I have just come out of a marriage that almost killed me. Not the way you think. Quieter than that. But still, I am not a woman who is ready to sit in this room and be looked at by a man right now. I want you to understand that. I understand that. Do you? Iris, I'm not here to look at you. Then why are you here? He was quiet for a moment. He looked at the fire. I'm here, he said, because 8 years ago at a wedding in Geneva, I told you that you could say no to this arrangement any time you wanted. And I meant it then. And I mean it now. And I thought, given what you have just come out of, that it was the sort of thing a person ought to hear twice in her life. Because once is not enough. She did not say anything. I'm not here to marry you today, Iris. I'm not here to marry you this year. I'm here to say hello because your father asked me to. And then I'm going to go home, and you are going to do what you need to do to the man who hurt you. And if, at the end of it, you decide you want to marry me, then we will talk. And if you decide you do not, then we will not. Your father and I have an understanding. I am not worried about your father. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? She looked at him. She looked at this man she had not seen in 8 years, sitting on her father's couch with his hands folded loosely in his lap. A man she had been told, since the age of 16, that she was going to marry someday. A man she had thought about exactly 3 times in the 3 years of her marriage to Ronan Vex, and each of those times she had thought about him the way a swimmer thinks about a shore. Yes, she said, I understand what you are saying to me. Good. Adrian? Yes. Thank you. He nodded once. He did not smile. He was not, she remembered now, a man who smiled easily. I'm going to go, he said. I'll stay at the inn in town tonight. I'll leave in the morning. You could stay for dinner? I could. I'm not going to. Why not? Because you're not ready to sit across a dinner table from a man tonight, Iris. Anyone can see it. And I don't want to be the man you sit across a dinner table from when you're not ready. We'll do that another night, in another year maybe, when you want to. He stood up. She stood up. He walked toward her. He stopped in front of her. He looked down at her for a long moment, and then, very carefully, he reached out and took her hand, and he turned it over, and he looked at her wrist. There was nothing there anymore. The bruise from last year was long gone, but he looked anyway, and then he folded her fingers closed and let go. I'll see you, Iris. Goodbye, Adrian. He walked to the door. He paused there with his hand on the frame, and he looked back at her over his shoulder. Iris? Yes. When you do it to him, the Vex boy. Yes. Don't be merciful. She held his eyes. I wasn't planning on it, she said. He nodded once. He left. She stood alone in the sitting room for a long time after he was gone. The fire had burned down almost to embers. Rosa came in at some point silently and put another log on, and left again without speaking. Iris stood by the window and watched Adrian Cade's black car pull away from the front of the house, and she watched the taillights disappear down the long gravel drive, and she thought, for the first time in a great many years, that there were still, somewhere in her life, people who had been waiting for her to come home. But that night, at 11 o'clock, she walked into her father's study. He was sitting in his chair by the window. He was not reading. He was not working. He was just sitting with his hands folded on his chest, looking out at the dark. Papa? Yes? Monday. He turned his head. He looked at her. Monday what? Monday we start. I'm ready. He looked at her for a long moment. You're sure? I'm sure. You're not rushing. I'm not rushing, Papa. I've been ready for a year. I was just waiting for my body to catch up with my head. He smiled, just a little. Okay, Piccola. Papa. Yes. I called him tonight. Her father did not react. He waited. He cried, she said. Good. He said he did it because he was bored of me. Her father closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, there was something in them that she had seen perhaps twice in her whole life and never, until this moment, directed at anyone who was still alive. Piccola. Yes. Come here. She walked across the room. She sat down on the arm of his chair, the way she had when she was a little girl. He did not put his arm around her. He had never been that kind of father. But he reached up and took her hand and he squeezed it once, hard, and then he let go. Monday, he said. Monday. She sat with her father in the dark study for a long time. Neither of them spoke. Outside, somewhere far away on the grounds, a dog was barking at something that was not there. The fire was out. The house was very quiet. It was the kind of quiet, Iris thought, that came before a storm moved in, when the birds had already stopped singing and the air had gone heavy and still. Somewhere 1,500 miles away, in a back room of a restaurant on the east side of a city, Ronan Vex was finally standing up from his table. He was wiping his face with the back of his hand. He was looking for the bathroom to wash his face before he went out into the street. He did not know it yet, but he had 4 days. 4 days before the first freight company called in its debts. 4 days before a federal auditor in a gray suit walked into his nightclub with a clipboard and a polite, devastating smile. 4 days before the first lieutenant he had trusted since he was 22 years old looked him in the eye across a desk and said very quietly, "I'm sorry, Ronan, but I've accepted another position." 4 days. In her father's study, Iris stood up from the arm of the chair. She kissed the top of her father's white head, very lightly, and she walked out of the study, and she went to her room, and she slept through the night without dreaming, for the 5th night in a row. In the morning, she came down to breakfast and told Rosa she wanted eggs, soft in the middle, with toast and black coffee and a single slice of orange on the side of the plate. Rosa made them without comment. Iris ate every bite. Monday came with a cold gray sky and a wind off the ridge that smelled like the first real snow of the year, though the snow would not come for another 2 weeks. Iris was up at 5. She drank her coffee standing at the kitchen window, watching the line of black cars already lining up along the gravel drive. 3 cars. Then 4. Then 6. By 6 o'clock there were 9 of them, parked in neat formation along the curve of the drive, and the men who had driven them were standing in small, quiet clusters by the hoods, smoking, waiting, not talking. Rosa came in and stood beside her at the window. "It's been a long time since this house had this many cars in the drive at breakfast time," Rosa said. "Yes. The last time was your mother's funeral." "I know." Rosa was quiet for a moment. Then she reached out and squeezed Iris's arm just above the elbow, very briefly, and walked away without saying anything else. Iris finished her coffee. She rinsed the cup. She walked down the long hall to her father's study, where the meeting would happen, and she stopped in the doorway and she looked at the room. The room had been rearranged overnight. The leather chairs had been pushed against the walls. A long table had been brought in from somewhere. Iris didn't know where, she had not asked, and set in the middle of the room with 9 chairs around it. At the head of the table was her father's chair. At the foot of the table was a chair that she understood, without needing to be told, was hers. She walked the length of the room and sat down in it. She did not feel triumphant. She felt, more than anything, tired. It was the tired of a person who has been carrying a stone up a hill for a long time and finally reached the top and realized there was another hill on the other side. The men came in one at a time. Her father brought them in himself, introducing each of them by name, watching her face as he did. Iris nodded at each one. She did not stand up. She did not smile. The first was Emilio Castana, 61 years old, her father's consigliere for the last 30 years. A small, neat man with a thin white mustache and eyes like a good judge. He had known Iris since she was 3. He had taught her how to read a contract when she was 9. "Miss Iris," he said. "Emilio." He sat down on her father's right. The second was Renzo Calabrese, her father's captain of the port, a thick man with thicker hands. He nodded at her. He did not speak. He sat down on her father's left. Then the others. Cesare Donati, who ran the books. Paolo Serra, who ran the couriers. 2 younger men she did not know. Lieutenants Emilio had been grooming in her absence, whose names she filed away carefully. A man she did recognize, Marco Vitale, who had been her father's driver once, long ago, and was clearly something more now. And then, last, walking in without knocking, a woman. Iris had not expected a woman. "Iris," her father said, "this is Sofia Renzulli. She has been handling our financial operations for the last 2 years. She is the reason you were able to move what you moved without anyone tracing it." Sofia Renzulli was perhaps 45. She was tall, she wore a black sweater and no jewelry, and she had the tired, patient face of a woman who had been underestimated her entire life and had stopped being surprised by it a long time ago. "Miss Vale," Sophia said. "Iris." "Iris." Sophia took the seat to Iris's right. When everyone was seated, Darius did not speak. He looked down the length of the table at his daughter, and he made a small gesture with his hand, almost invisible, that meant, "This is yours, Piccola. Run it." Iris took a breath. "Thank you for coming," she said. "All of you. I know most of you have been told only pieces of what is about to happen. I want to give you the whole picture before we begin, so that no man in this room can ever say later that he did not know what he was agreeing to." The room was very still. "My name is Iris Vale. 3 years ago, I married a man named Ronan Vex. I married him under my mother's maiden name with a history and a background that were constructed for me, for reasons that most of you already understand. That marriage ended 11 weeks ago, legally and financially, on terms so clean that Mr. Vex himself did not realize it had ended until 2 weeks ago. He now knows. He now knows who I am. He now knows who my father is. And he knows, as of Thursday night, that he is not going to survive what is coming. She let that sit in the room for a moment. What is coming, she continued, is a dismantling, not a war. We are not going to war with the Vex organization. We are not going to the mattresses. Not one of the men in this room, or any of your men, is going to fire a weapon in anger before this is over. If anyone does, I will consider that a failure on my part, and I will make sure the failure is corrected. Renzo Calabresi grunted. It was not a disagreement. It was something closer to approval. What we are going to do, Iris said, is take him apart in pieces, piece by piece, quietly, over a period of approximately 90 days. By the time we are finished, Ronan Vex will not own anything. He will not command anyone. He will not be able to walk into any room in this city, any restaurant, any club, any courthouse, any goddamn dry cleaner, without the people inside that room falling silent. He will become, in public, what he has always been in private, which is a man whose entire existence was built out of other people's patience. We are going to withdraw that patience. How much time do we give him? Emilio asked quietly. 90 days. And at the end? At the end, Iris said, he lives. Emilio looked at her. He did not blink. You understand what you are asking, Iris. Yes, you understand that when you leave a man like that alive, a man who has been humiliated publicly, a man who has been stripped, a man who has nothing left, you understand that what you are leaving behind is a weapon, perhaps a small weapon, perhaps not, but a weapon that will want, for the rest of its life, to find its way back to you. I understand, Emilio. And still, he looked at her for a long moment, then slowly he nodded. Then we begin, he said. By Wednesday, the first freight company was gone. It happened quietly, the way Iris had wanted. A man in a suit from a bank Ronan had almost forgotten existed walked into the company's offices on Tuesday afternoon and served the CFO with notice that a $64 million line of credit, which had been quietly rolling forward for the last 6 years, was being called back in its entirety. The CFO called Ronan. Ronan told him not to worry. The CFO told him that the bank was not open to negotiation. Ronan told him, sharply, to get on a plane to the bank and make them open to negotiation. The CFO did. The bank would not see him. By Wednesday morning, the company was in involuntary receivership, and a man Ronan had never heard of had been appointed trustee of its assets. Ronan was standing in the kitchen of the penthouse, barefoot, in a black t-shirt, when his CFO called him with the news. He listened. He did not interrupt. He looked out the window at the gray winter sky and at the river far below, and when the CFO was done talking, he said, "Okay, thank you." He hung up. He stood at the window for a long time. Then he threw the phone across the room so hard it shattered against the far wall. The penthouse was a mess. It had been a mess for 11 days. Ronan had fired the cleaning woman on the day he realized Iris was not coming back, because the cleaning woman's presence in the empty rooms was, for some reason he could not articulate, unbearable to him. He had also fired his personal chef, his driver, and 2 of his bodyguards. The bodyguards he had fired because they had known. Victor Linaro had told him, on that night in the restaurant, that everyone in the city was backing away, and Ronan had come home and looked at his own men with new eyes and realized that 2 of them could not quite meet his gaze anymore, and he had fired them both before the sun came up. They had left quietly. That was in a way the worst part. They had not argued. They had not asked for severance. They had simply picked up their jackets and walked out, and the one named Paul had paused at the door and said, "I'm sorry, boss, for what it's worth." And then he had closed the door behind him, and Ronan had sat in an empty apartment for the rest of the night with a bottle of scotch and the absolute certainty that in 20 years of knowing Paul, he had never thought of Paul once as a person. He was thinking about Paul a great deal now. He was thinking about a great many people now. It was as if the disappearance of Iris Vale had pulled a thread in the back of his head, and the thread had kept coming, and now the whole garment of his life was coming apart in his hands, And underneath it was not the confident, calm man he had always believed himself to be, but a scared, hollow, very ordinary man who had somehow, through sheer inherited momentum, convinced a city that he was powerful. The understanding was unbearable to him. It came over him at strange hours. It woke him up at 3 a.m. It made him, twice in the last week, vomit in the guest bathroom for reasons that had nothing to do with what he had been drinking. He was coming apart. He did not want to come apart. On Friday morning, a federal auditor named Eleanor Briggs walked into the business offices above the Aperture Club, on the west side of the city, with a clipboard and a polite, devastating smile. She was 49 years old. She had worked for the Financial Crimes Division of the Department of the Treasury for 23 years. She was very good at her job. She had been given, 2 weeks ago, an envelope of documents that had been slid across a cafe table to her by a junior reporter she had known since he was her son's roommate in college. The reporter had not told her where the documents came from. He had said, "Ellie, I don't know what to do with these, but I think they're real, and I think you're the person who should have them." The documents were real. They were, in fact, the cleanest roadmap Eleanor Briggs had ever been handed in 23 years to a working money laundering operation. She did not thank the reporter. She did not ask him any more questions. She went back to her office, and she filed a request for an audit, and the request was granted, and on Friday morning she walked into the Aperture Club with a clipboard and a smile, and the two men behind the desk, when she introduced herself, went the color of old cheese. "We'd like to begin with the books for the last 3 fiscal years, please," Eleanor Briggs said. "If that's convenient." By 10 o'clock she had made 3 phone calls. By noon, a second auditor had arrived to assist her. By 4 in the afternoon, federal marshals were parked outside on the street. Ronan got the call at 4:15. He was in the back room of a restaurant on the east side, a different restaurant from the one where Victor Linero had spoken to him. That restaurant he had not been able to bring himself to go back to. And he was having lunch with a man named Dennis Cow, one of his 2 laundering specialists, and they had been in the middle of a quiet, careful conversation about where the money could be moved and how fast, before somebody in the federal government got curious. The answer, as it turned out, was nowhere and not fast enough. Dennis Cow took the call. He listened. His face did something that in any other man would have been a smile, but that on Dennis Cow, who had not really smiled at anything in 15 years, was closer to a grimace of pity. He hung up. "Boss?" "What?" "Federal auditor at the Aperture. Since 9 this morning. They've already called for backup. They've already called for marshals." Ronan set his fork down very carefully on the edge of his plate. "How?" "I don't know how, boss." "Dennis? How?" "Ronan? I don't know how. Somebody fed them something. I don't know what, and I don't know who, and I don't—" He stopped. He rubbed his hand across his mouth. "Boss, I gotta go." "Where?" "Home." "Dennis." "Boss, you know where this is going. You know I can't be here when it gets there. I got kids." He stood up. He put his napkin on the table. He did not look at Ronan. "Dennis, I'm sorry, boss." "Dennis, sit down." Dennis Cow paused. He stood there for a moment with his hand on the back of his chair, and then he did something Ronan had never, in 7 years of knowing the man, seen him do. He looked at Ronan with an expression of something very close to contempt. "No, boss," Dennis Cow said. "I'm not going to sit down." And he walked out. Ronan stayed at the table. The waiter came over and, without being asked, quietly took Dennis Cow's plate away. Ronan looked at his own plate. He had ordered the veal. He had barely touched it. He had no memory, in that moment, of ordering the veal. He had no memory of anything. He picked up his phone. He called Celeste Monteith. She answered on the 3rd ring. Her voice, when she answered, was strange, careful. "Ronan." "Celeste." "I can't talk right now." "Celeste, I need you to come over tonight." "I can't." "Celeste, I need to see you. I need to—" "Ronan, I can't. Please don't call me again." He sat with the phone pressed against his ear. "Celeste." "I mean it, Ronan. I'm sorry. Please." She hung up. He put the phone down on the table. He looked at it. He picked up the phone again. He scrolled through the contacts. He found the name of the second woman on the list, the one who was not Celeste, the one he had been seeing off and on for 8 months. He called her. It went to voicemail on the first ring, which meant she had declined the call, which meant he understood very clearly, for the second time in a week, that word had reached her too. He put the phone down again. He left cash on the table. He walked out into the street. It was cold. The wind cut through his jacket. He looked around for his driver and then remembered with a small, humiliating jolt that he had fired his driver 4 days ago. He stood on the sidewalk for a long moment. A man in a $4,000 suit with no car and nowhere to go, and for the first time since he was 9 years old, he did not know how to get himself home. He walked. He walked for almost an hour, through neighborhoods he had not walked through in 15 years, past restaurants he half-owned and shops that had once paid him tribute, and the small, unimportant corners of the city he had convinced himself were his. He passed men who had been introduced to him at weddings. He passed men who had drunk from his bottles. Nobody looked at him. That was the thing. Nobody looked at him. It was not that they were avoiding his eyes exactly. It was that they did not, any of them, appear to know that he was there. He was becoming, in real time, a ghost in his own city. Sad. On Saturday, the Aperture Club was seized. On Sunday, the second nightclub, the Wicker on 12th, was raided, and its books seized and 3 men arrested, including the manager that Ronan had personally appointed 4 years ago. On Monday morning, Ronan Vex opened his front door to find 2 men standing in his hallway. He did not know the men. One of them was thin. One of them was heavy. They had the look of men who had been through 5 bad wars and considered themselves lucky to have seen so few. "Mr. Vex," the thin one said, "may we come in?" "Who are you?" "Friends of a friend." "I don't have any friends." The thin man smiled just slightly. "Then think of us," he said, "as messengers." He did not let them in. He did not have to. They were not the kind of men who required you to let them in. They simply stood in the hallway, and the thin one reached into his coat, and he took out an envelope, and he held it out. "For you, Mr. Vex." "What is it?" "I was not told, Mr. Vex. I was only told to deliver it." Ronan took the envelope. The 2 men stood there for another moment. Then the thin one inclined his head, and the 2 of them turned, and they walked back down the hallway to the elevator. And Ronan stood with the envelope in his hand and watched them go, and did not move until the elevator doors had closed behind them. He took the envelope into the kitchen. He sat down at the island. He stared at the envelope for a long time. Then he opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It was a handwritten note. The handwriting was his wife's. He knew it instantly, in the way you know the handwriting of someone who has signed holiday cards in front of you, and grocery lists, and birthday cards to your mother for 3 straight years. The note said, "Ronan, there's a man named Lucas Breen at the Hartwell Hotel, room 812. He has a flash drive with everything you've done in the last 5 years. I purchased it from him this morning. He does not know who I am. He believes he has sold it to a competing interest. He will be approaching you in the next 72 hours to demand another payment for his silence, which he does not understand he no longer possesses. I am giving you this information, Ronan, not because I feel sorry for you, but because I want you to understand something. You do not currently know what is yours and what is mine. Almost everything you think is yours, Ronan, is mine. It has been for some time. It has been for longer than you know. When he approaches you, do what you want with him. I do not care. I am not writing you again. Iris." Ronan read the note 3 times. Then he laid it flat on the marble island, and he put his head down on top of it, and for a long time he did not move. At Holloway Ridge, Iris was in the library with Sophia Renzulli, going through ledgers, when her father walked in without knocking. "Piccola." "Papa." "You sent him the note." "I did." Sophia Renzulli, who was a woman of almost supernatural discretion, quietly stood up, gathered her papers, and walked out. She closed the door behind her without being asked. Darius came in. He sat down across the desk from Iris. "Why?" he said. "Why the note?" "Yes, because I want him to understand. Because I don't want him to tell himself later that he was destroyed by bad luck. I want him to know in every bone of his body that every single thing that is happening to him is being done by one person, on purpose, one move at a time. I want him to spend the rest of his life understanding it." "You could have sent him nothing. He would have understood anyway." "No, Papa, he wouldn't. He is very good at not understanding things. It is the only gift he has. I'm taking that gift away from him." Her father looked at her for a long moment. Then he smiled, very slightly, and he shook his head, and he stood up. "Your mother," he said, "would have done exactly the same thing. She would have written him a letter." "My mother used to write letters to her enemies? Your mother Piccola is the reason we have a family business, not me. She was sharper than me by a factor of 3. On the day she died, I lost my best advisor and the sharpest knife in this house. And the only thing that kept me going afterward was the knowledge that I had a small daughter who already had her mother's eyes." Iris looked down at the desk. She did not trust her voice. "Papa?" "Yes." "I don't remember her very well anymore." "I know, Piccola. I try. I try to remember her, and the more I try, the less of her I can find. There are whole years I can't... Papa? There are whole years I can't... Iris?" "Yes." "She would be proud of you." She did not answer. She could not. She put her hand flat on the desk, and she kept it there. And her father came around the side of the desk, and he put his hand on the top of her head, very lightly, the way he used to when she was a child and had woken from a bad dream. He stood there for a long moment. Then he took his hand away, and he went to the door. "Piccola." "Yes." "Adrian called this morning." She looked up. "He did? He asked how you were." "What did you tell him?" "I told him you were working. I told him not to bother you for a while. He said he understood." "Good." "Iris?" "Yes, Papa." "He's a good man." "I know, Papa. Better than I deserved for an arrangement I made. Better than you deserved for a marriage that was supposed to be a transaction." "I know, Papa." He looked at her for a moment longer. Then he closed the door behind him. By the end of the second week, Ronan Vex had lost 4 of the 7 lieutenants he had come into the month with. The first had simply not come to a scheduled meeting. The second had called in, pleading a family emergency, and had not been seen again. The third, the one who had a 15-year-old daughter with a drug problem, had come to Ronan's apartment late at night with his hat in his hands. He had not tried to make excuses. He had said quietly, "Boss, I've been offered something. I have to take it. I hope you understand." Ronan had stared at him. The man's name was Gerald. He had known Gerald for 11 years. "Gerald?" "I'm sorry, boss." "Gerald, what are they offering you?" "Boss, I can't tell you that." "Gerald." "Boss." And Gerald had looked up at him, and he had looked old suddenly, in a way Ronan had never noticed before, and he had said, "They're paying for my girl's treatment, for as long as it takes. They didn't ask me for anything in return. They said I was free to keep working for you if I wanted to. But boss, Ronan, I can't keep working for you because the people who offered me that, I know who they are, boss. I know what's coming. I've got kids. I can't be on the wrong side of this." Ronan had stared at him. "Get out of my apartment, Gerald." "Boss, get out." Gerald had gone. The 4th lieutenant had not come to Ronan's apartment at all. He had simply sent a letter, by courier, a 2-line letter that said, "Mr. Vex, effective immediately, please consider my association with your organization terminated. Respectfully, H. Falone." Ronan had read the letter. Then he had taken a bottle of scotch out of the liquor cabinet, and he had sat down on the couch, and he had drunk the entire bottle in 2 hours, and then he had stood up and walked out of the apartment in his socks and gone down to the lobby and stood in the middle of the lobby screaming at nobody until the doorman, very gently, had taken his elbow and walked him back to the elevator. The doorman's name was Hector. Hector had been the doorman at the Verona Tower for 16 years. "Mr. Vex," Hector said quietly as the elevator rose, "I'm going to have to ask you to be a little more careful. We've had complaints." "Complaints?" "Yes, sir." "From who?" "From other residents, sir. 2 of them spoke to the building manager today." "Other?" "Hector, this is my building. I own a piece of this building. Yes, sir." "Hector." "Yes, sir." "You're not going to ask me to leave?" Hector did not answer for a moment. He looked at the floor of the elevator. "Mr. Vex," Hector said carefully, "I am not the one who makes that decision, but the building manager will be contacting you tomorrow morning. I wanted you to know tonight because I have always respected you, sir, and because my wife asked me to. Your wife? Yes, sir. Why is your wife asking you anything about me? Hector looked up at him. He had kind eyes. Ronan had never noticed that before. Ronan had in 16 years never once looked closely enough at Hector to know what kind of eyes he had. Because my wife reads the papers, Mr. Vex, Hector said quietly. And because she is a worried woman by nature. She worries about a lot of things. Lately, she has been worrying about me. She has been asking me every evening whether I am sure that this building is still a safe place to be working. The elevator doors opened on the 42nd floor. Hector did not get out. He held the door for Ronan with one steady hand. Good night, Mr. Vex. Good night, Hector. Ronan walked down this hall to his apartment. He did not turn around. He did not look back. He understood, with a small clean clarity that came through the scotch, that Hector the doorman, a man he had tipped at Christmas with $100 bills for 16 years without ever learning his last name, had just tried, in his own careful way, to warn him. It was, Ronan realized, the first act of kindness anyone had done for him in the month of November. On the 1st of December, Ronan's accountant called him and told him, in a voice that shook, that the personal accounts had been frozen. Frozen by who? Ronan said. Sir, it's a civil action. It was filed Friday afternoon. The paperwork just came through this morning. Someone is alleging that assets in your personal accounts were improperly transferred from a business entity that was in receivership at the time of transfer. The court has issued a preliminary hold while it reviews the claim. How much is frozen? All of it, sir. How much is all of it, sir? How much, sir? Your liquid personal assets total approximately $4.1 million. That has been frozen. Your real estate is not directly frozen, but it is encumbered by the preliminary injunction, meaning you cannot sell or transfer any property titled in your name without court approval. I've been trying to reach your attorney to discuss. Which attorney? Sir? Which attorney have you been trying to reach, Dennis? Sir, I'm not Dennis. I'm Howard. I'm Howard Teague. Howard. Which attorney? Mr. Keening, your personal attorney. Howard. Yes, sir. Mr. Keening retired 8 days ago. There was a long silence on the line. I was not aware of that, sir. No, nobody tells me anything anymore. Ronan laughed. It came out strange, short and ugly. Howard? Yes, sir? Are you still my accountant? Another silence, longer this time. Mr. Vex, Howard. Mr. Vex, I was going to call you this afternoon anyway, to have a conversation about the nature of our... Okay, Howard. Sir. It's okay, Howard. You don't have to finish the sentence. I understand. Mr. Vex, I'm sorry. I really am. My family... I said it's okay, Howard. He hung up. He sat in the kitchen for a long time. He looked at the wall. He looked at the granite countertop. He looked at the stupid, expensive coffee machine Iris had bought him for their second anniversary, and that he had, exactly 3 times in 2 years, used. He looked at the kitchen drawer. He got up. He walked to the kitchen drawer. He opened it. Inside, in a neat line, were the sharp knives. He looked at the knives for a long moment. Then he closed the drawer. He went into the living room. He lay down on the couch. He stared at the ceiling. He stayed there until it was dark. On the 3rd of December, Iris was sitting in the library going over a list of real estate holdings with Emilio when her phone rang. It was a number she did not recognize. She looked at Emilio. He raised an eyebrow. She answered, "Hello." "Iris." It was a woman's voice. She did not recognize it at first. Then she did, and her stomach went cold, and she stood up from the desk without meaning to. "Celeste." "Yes." "How did you get this number?" I asked around. "I'm sorry. I'm really sorry to call you. I know I shouldn't be calling. I know I'm probably the last person. Celeste, how did you get this number?" Somebody gave it to me, at a bar. A woman I've never met before. She told me that if I ever needed to reach you, this was the number. She gave it to me 2 months ago. She said someday I might need it." Iris closed her eyes. "Celeste, what do you want?" Ronan called me an hour ago. And Iris, Celeste, take a breath. Tell me what he said. Celeste Monteith was crying. Iris could hear it on the line. Celeste was not crying in the loud, theatrical way some women cried on the phone. She was crying in the quiet, swallowed way of a woman who had been keeping herself together for a long time and had just reached the end of it. He said he was going to kill himself, Iris. Iris did not move. Emilio, across the desk, went still. He said he was sitting in the apartment with a bottle of scotch and he wouldn't tell me what he had. He just said he had something, and he was going to use it, and he was going to... Iris, he said my name. He kept saying my name, and I hung up on him. I hung up on him, Iris, and I didn't know who else to call. His mother won't talk to him. He doesn't have anyone. There's nobody left. Iris sat back down in the chair very slowly. She did not speak for a long moment. Iris, I heard you, Celeste. Are you going to... Celeste? Yes. Are you in love with him? The line was quiet for a long moment. No, Celeste said. I don't know what I am. I don't think so. I think I was just lonely. I think he saw that, and he used it, and I let him. I'm not calling you because I love him, Iris. I'm calling you because I don't want him to die in that apartment, and I don't know who else to tell, and because I think he's your problem, not mine. Iris almost laughed. All right, Celeste. All right. All right. I'll handle it. Don't call this number again. I won't. Celeste. Yes. For what it's worth. Yes. You were not the reason. You were the excuse. I want you to remember that. You did not take anything from me. He had already thrown it away before you got there. Celeste did not answer. Iris hung up. She put the phone down on the desk. She looked at Emilio. Emilio. Yes. Send 2 men to the Verona Tower. Now. I want him found. I want him awake. And I want him held. Not hurt. Held. I'll drive down tonight. Iris. Yes. You are sure? I am sure. You understand that we have spent 7 weeks making this man want to die. Yes, Emilio. I understand. And now I do not want him to die. Not like this. Not in a kitchen with a bottle of scotch at 3 p.m. alone. He does not get that. He does not get the easy out. I want him alive. I want him alive for a very long time. I want him to see the rest of it. Emilio looked at her for a moment longer. Then he nodded. He stood up. He walked to the door. Emilio. Yes. Tell the men to be polite. 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 I don't want him touched. I don't want him frightened more than he already is. I want him brought in the way you would bring in a sick animal. Do you understand me? I understand you, Iris. He left. She sat alone at the desk for a long moment. Then she picked up the phone and she dialed her father. Papa. Yes, Piccola. I'm going to the city tonight. For what? For him. There was a silence. Piccola. Papa, I'm not going to be long. I'll be home tomorrow. You are going to see him. Yes. In person. Yes. Why? She looked out the window. The afternoon light was going red on the stone wall at the edge of the property. Because, she said, I have spent a month and a half making a man understand what I am from a distance. And I want, one time, before the rest of it is done, to stand in front of him and look him in the face and let him understand it up close. I want him to see me, Papa. I want him to see who he threw away. And then I want to walk out of that apartment and never see him again as long as I live. There was a long silence on the line. Then her father said very quietly, Take Tomas with you. Yes, Papa. Take Tomas with you, and take Marco, and do not go into that apartment alone, Iris. Do you hear me? I hear you. I love you, Piccola. I love you too, Papa. She hung up. She walked to the window. She stood there for a long time. The sun was setting. The grounds were going blue in the long light. Somewhere down by the old stone wall, she could hear the faint sound of one of the men on the property whistling as he walked, a low, tuneless whistle that was neither happy nor sad. And for a moment Iris Vale stood in the quiet library of the house she had grown up in, and she understood that in a few hours she was going to get into a car, and she was going to drive 1,500 miles through the dark. And at the end of that drive, she was going to walk into an apartment and stand, for the first and last time, face to face, with the man she had once called her husband. She was not afraid. She was not triumphant. She was more than anything, finally and completely awake. Part 3 lưu ý. Viết 5.500 đến 6.000 từ liên kết liền mạch với các phần trước trong câu chuyện, pha hội thoại tạo thành một câu chuyện liền mạch khi ghép lại. Mỗi phần liền mạch với phần trước, không giới thiệu lại câu chuyện ở đầu phần mới. Liên kết các phần của câu chuyện một cách liền mạch, sử dụng câu chuyện tiếp giữa các phần. Duy trì chủ đề, tránh ngắt quãng đột ngột, không sử dụng gạch đầu dòng hoặc tiêu đề phụ, phong cách kể chuyện Mỹ, Hoa Kỳ, giống văn giàu cảm xúc, kể theo ngôi thứ 3. Giữ đồ kịch tính không viết lan man, nhân vật không hoàn hảo, hội thoại tự nhiên, tránh ngôn ngữ văn chương sáo rơi và cụm từ AI điển hình. Viết như nhà văn chuyên nghiệp, không như AI cố gắng nghe sang. Có yếu tố con người, cấm miêu tả qua mượt mà và hoàn hảo, kết thúc phần không giới thiệu phần sau. Lưu ý trả lời trong mục tin nhắn không nhảy sang document, chỉ đần bắt buộc, không được xuất hiện trong nội dung truyền. Đây là một câu chuyện điện ảnh hoàn toàn hư cấu được tạo ra chỉ nhằm mục đích giải trí, không đề cập hay ngụ ý rằng nó dựa trên sự kiện có thật, người thật hoặc câu chuyện có thật. Không sử dụng các cụm từ như dựa trên một câu chuyện có thật, theo ghi chép hoặc bất cứ điều gì tương tự. Tất cả các nhân vật, địa điểm, tổ chức và sự kiện phải hoàn toàn hư cấu. Lưu ý, không được viết quá 6.000 từ. Show more 850. The drive took 11 hours. Iris slept through most of it, in the back seat of the black Lincoln, with a wool blanket across her knees and her head against the cold window. Tomas drove. Marco sat in the passenger seat, silent, one hand resting loosely on his knee, in the particular way of a man who has trained himself, over many years, to be able to move that hand very fast if he had to. They pulled into the city at 4:15 in the morning. The streets were empty. The snow that had been threatening for 3 weeks had finally come down overnight, and the sidewalks were clean and white and untouched, and the Verona Tower, when it came into view across the river, looked like something that had been drawn into the dark with a silver pencil. Iris sat up. She smoothed her hair. She pulled a small compact out of her bag and looked at her own face in the little round mirror, and she did not adjust anything. She put the compact away. Tomas. Yes, Miss Vale. Pull up in front. Don't use the side entrance. Yes, Miss Vale. The car stopped under the gold canopy. The doorman, not Hector, she knew, worked the day shift, came out and opened the car door, and when he saw her face, he did not quite know what to do with it. He was young. He had not been there long. He bowed his head in a small, confused way that was not quite the bow he would have given a resident, and he stepped back, and Iris got out of the car without looking at him. Marco and Tomas got out behind her. They rode the elevator in silence. 42 floors. The little light above the door climbed slowly through the numbers. Iris watched it. She did not check her reflection in the mirrored panels. She did not adjust her coat. She stood very still with her hands loose at her sides, and when the elevator reached the 42nd floor and the doors slid open, she stepped out first and walked down the hallway ahead of the 2 men. 2 of her father's men were standing outside the apartment door. They straightened when they saw her. Miss Vale? How is he? Awake. He cried for about an hour after we brought him down from the bedroom. He stopped about 40 minutes ago. He's in the living room. He hasn't tried to move. He hasn't asked for anything. Has he eaten? No, Miss Vale. Did he have anything in his hand when you found him? The man hesitated. Yes, Miss Vale. What? A pistol. His father's pistol, I think. It's in the kitchen now, unloaded. I took the rounds. They're in my pocket. Give them to Marco. The man handed over a handful of small brass cartridges. Marco took them without comment and slipped them into the inside pocket of his coat. Thank you, Iris said. The 2 of you can wait in the hall. I'll be half an hour, maybe less. Miss Vale, your father said... I know what my father said. Marco is coming in with me. He'll stand by the door. Ronan will not touch me. If he tries, Marco will handle it. But I want the rest of you in the hall. This is a conversation, not a performance. Yes, Miss Vale. She turned the doorknob. It was unlocked. She pushed the door open. The apartment smelled like scotch and stale cigarettes, and something faintly worse. The particular smell of a man who has not showered in 3 days and has been crying off and on for most of that time. Iris stepped inside. Marco came in behind her and, without being told, stopped just inside the door and leaned his shoulder against the wall beside it. He crossed his arms. He did not speak. He simply stood there, a large, quiet presence, with eyes that could see the whole room. Iris walked down the hallway. She passed the kitchen, where the pistol was lying on the marble island, black and long, and somehow very small in the middle of all that empty pale stone. She did not stop to look at it. She walked past the dining room, where the chairs were still arranged around the table exactly as she had left them 9 weeks ago. She walked past the door to what had been, for 3 years, their bedroom, and she did not look through that door either. She stopped in the entrance to the living room. Ronan was sitting on the couch. He was wearing sweatpants and a white undershirt that had a stain on the front of it. His feet were bare. His hair was greasy. He had not shaved in days. He was holding a glass of something, scotch probably, though it could have been water at this point, and he was staring at nothing. He did not turn his head when she came into the room. He had heard her. She knew he had heard her. He simply did not look up. "Ronan?" He closed his eyes. "Ronan, look at me." "I don't want to." "Ronan." He opened his eyes. He turned his head. She watched him see her. It was a strange thing, watching a man see her. Really see her. For 3 years she had stood in front of this man and he had not seen her. Not once, not really. He had seen a shape, a function, a role. He had seen the woman who made his coffee and folded his shirts and wore his rings and took his arm at the charity dinners. He had never, in the whole time she had been married to him, looked at her face and asked the simple question, "Who is this?" He was asking it now. She could see him asking it. She could see him trying to match the woman standing in the doorway of his living room with the woman he had been married to, and she could see in his face the small private horror of realizing that the match was not going to come. That the woman in front of him was not the woman he had known, that the woman in front of him had been there the whole time, underneath the other one, and he had missed her, that he had been sleeping next to her for 3 years and had not once, in 3 years, bothered to look at her closely enough to notice. He made a small sound. It was not a word. It was just a sound, low in his throat, the kind of sound a man makes when he has been hit in the stomach. "Iris?" "Hello, Ronan. You came." "Yes." "Why?" She walked into the living room. She did not sit down on the couch beside him. She took the armchair across from the couch, the same armchair she had always taken, in the 3 years she had lived in this apartment when she had wanted to read. She sat down. She did not take off her coat. "I came," she said, "because I heard you were thinking of doing something stupid." "Who told you?" "Celeste called me." He laughed. It came out ragged. "Celeste called you?" "She did." "Jesus Christ." "She didn't call me because she loves you, Ronan. She called me because she's frightened, and because she didn't know who else to call, and because in some part of her head she has always understood that I was the only person who was ever going to be able to do anything about you. That was very clear from the way she talked to me. She is not your friend, Ronan. She was never your friend. I want you to understand that before we begin, because I think it matters." He stared at her. His eyes were red. "Before we begin what?" he said. "Before we have the conversation I came here to have." "Iris?" "Yes." "I don't understand any of this." "I know you don't. That's why I drove 11 hours. He pressed his hand against his face. His shoulders began to shake. He was crying again, but quietly, the way he had been crying off and on all night. It was not a dramatic cry. It was the cry of a man who had simply run out of anywhere for his body to put what was inside him. Iris watched him. She did not feel pity. She had expected on the drive down to feel pity, and she had prepared herself for it. She had told herself that she would not let the pity change what she had come to do. But the pity, when she looked at him now, did not come. What came instead was something smaller and cleaner and stranger. It was the feeling you get when you walk back into a room where you spent a long, hard part of your life, and you realize that the room is smaller than you remembered and dingier, and that the wallpaper you had once thought was pretty is actually cheap. "Ronan." "Yes." "Put the glass down." He looked at the glass in his hand as if he had forgotten he was holding it. He set it on the coffee table. A little of the scotch sloshed over the side. "Thank you." "Iris, I'm going to talk for a few minutes. I'd like you not to interrupt me. When I'm done, you can say whatever you want. I'll listen. Then I'm going to leave. Do you understand? Yes. Good. She did not begin immediately. She looked at him for a moment longer, sitting on the couch in his dirty undershirt, and she took one long breath, and she began. I was 27 years old when my father sent me to you. I was 27, and I had already finished 2 degrees, and I had already spent 3 years learning how my father's world worked from the inside. I did not need to marry you. I did not want to marry you. I agreed to marry you because my father told me that our 2 families had been at war, quietly, for 20 years, and that if I did not agree to marry you, more men were going to die than had already died. And I did not want more men to die, Ronan. I was a young woman, and I had a soft spot in me, and I believed I could do a hard thing for a few years to keep a lot of people alive. Iris, I'm not done. He closed his mouth. I came to you, she said, with my whole face. I came to you intending to be, for as long as our families required it, a good wife. I was not in love with you, I did not pretend to be. But I came to you intending to respect you, and to keep your house, and to be at your side in every public way a man in your position could possibly want a woman to be at his side. And I did that, Ronan. I did that for 3 years. I did not once embarrass you. I did not once raise my voice to you in front of another human being. I defended you to your mother, who did not like me. I defended you to your sister, who was jealous of me. I defended you twice to men at dinner parties who had said things about you that a wife with less self-control would have let slide. I was a better wife to you, Ronan, than you had any right in this lifetime to expect. Ronan was staring at the coffee table. His hands were shaking. And you threw it away, Iris said. Not once, not twice. You threw it away so consistently, Ronan, and with such a blind, stupid, swaggering kind of certainty that I finally had to admit to myself that you were not going to stop, that there was no number of chances I could give you that would be enough, that you were going to keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it because you had never in your life, not once, been in a room with a consequence that had been bigger than you. Iris, I'm still not done, he swallowed. I am the consequence, Ronan. I am the consequence you never met. I am the thing that was always going to come for you eventually, whether I was your wife or whether I was some other woman you had thrown away. You did not become a bad man because of me. You were a bad man when I found you. I just happened to be the bad man's wife on the particular Thursday night. I looked across a street in the rain and watched him kiss a girl in a red coat in the back seat of his Maserati, and I decided, standing in a coffee shop full of strangers, that I was not going to be anybody's wife for one more day of this life. Do you understand me? He nodded. He was crying again. It was not a dignified cry. His mouth was open, and there was spit on his chin, and his eyes were swollen almost shut. I want to tell you what happens next, Iris said. Iris, please. Ronan. He fell silent. What happens next, she said, is this. You are going to live. That is not a mercy, Ronan. I want you to understand that very clearly. I am not leaving you alive because I have forgiven you, and I am not leaving you alive because I am too soft to do what my father, if I asked him, would do in 5 minutes tonight without blinking. I am leaving you alive because I want you to have a long time, Ronan, a very long time. I want you to have 40 more years of walking down streets in this city and watching strangers not recognize you. I want you to rent a small apartment somewhere because your large one is already gone. The building manager will notify you tomorrow morning that your lease is terminated, effective in 30 days for cause. And I want you to sit in that small apartment, Ronan, and I want you to think every single night before you fall asleep about what you threw away. Iris, you are not going to keep anything, Ronan. You are going to sign a series of documents over the next 6 weeks. Emilio Castana will come to you with them. You will sign them. If you do not sign them, we will proceed anyway. But you will be made to understand, through means I would prefer not to have to use, that signing them is the path that keeps you alive and in one piece. Do you understand what I am telling you? Yes. What are you going to do, Ronan, when Emilio comes to see you? I'm going to sign. You are going to sign. I'm going to sign. Good. She paused. She looked at him. He was staring at her the way a drowning man stares at the coastline he is being pulled away from. You are not going to contact me again, she said, ever. You are not going to write to me. You are not going to call me. You are not going to send messengers to my father's house. You are not, Ronan, going to mention my name in a room that contains another human being. If you do any of these things, I will know within the hour, and I will remove from your life the one small thing you think you have left, which is your freedom. Do you understand me? Yes. What one thing do I still have the power to take from you, Ronan? My freedom. Your freedom. I want you to say it out loud. You still have the power to take my freedom. Good. She stood up. She had not taken off her coat. She buttoned the top button of it now, slowly, with steady fingers, and she looked down at him, sitting on his couch in his dirty undershirt, and she said, Ronan. Yes. One more thing. Yes. You asked me on this phone last month why I did what I did. I gave you the question back and you answered it. Do you remember? I remember. You said you were bored of me. I remember. I want you to understand something, Ronan, before I walk out of this apartment, because I'm not going to see you again after today, and I want to make sure there is nothing left between us that you can lie to yourself about. She stepped closer. She stood directly in front of him. You were not bored of me, Ronan. You were afraid of me. You did not know you were afraid of me because you are not a man who has ever had the emotional literacy to recognize his own fear. But you were afraid of me. From the first month of our marriage, you were afraid of me. You could feel every time I walked into a room that there was something in me you could not get hold of. There was something in me you could not reduce. There was something in me that made you feel small even when I was making your coffee. And because you could not stand feeling small, and because you were not man enough to ask yourself why a woman like me, who you had convinced yourself was nothing, could make you feel that way, you chose to hurt me. You chose to humiliate me. You chose to take other women into our bed, not because you wanted them, but because you wanted me to fight. You wanted me to scream. You wanted me to throw a plate at your head. You wanted me to do any loud, small, ordinary thing that would have made you feel, in your bones, that I was not bigger than you. He was not crying anymore. He was looking up at her with his mouth slightly open, the way a boy looks at a teacher who has just told him something he knew, deep down, but had never heard spoken. I was always bigger than you, Ronan, Iris said. I am sorry. It is not personal. You could have had a wife who was smaller than you. Many women are smaller than you. There was a woman somewhere in the world who was exactly the size of you, and she would have been happy to be your wife. And you would have grown old together, and you would have had 2 ordinary children and a golden retriever, and you would have died peacefully at 79 of a heart attack in a restaurant in Miami. That was the life that was available to you, in some other version of this story. You did not get it. You did not get it because you married me. And you married me because when my father offered me to you to keep the peace between our houses, you took the bait. You took the bait because you were greedy. You took the bait because you believed that a beautiful wife was a feather in your cap, and you did not care who she was underneath the dress. I want you to remember that. You did this to yourself, Ronan. I am not the reason this happened to you. Your greed is the reason this happened to you. I was just the knife your greed happened to reach for. She looked at him for a long moment. Goodbye, Ronan. He did not say anything. He opened his mouth. He closed it again. He looked up at her with red, wet eyes, and she saw, with a small, cold clarity, that she would remember for the rest of her life that he was trying to say something, and that whatever he was trying to say was something like, I loved you. And she saw, underneath that he would have been lying. He had never loved her. He had never even tried to love her. The word was in his mouth because it was the only word left in the language that he thought might save him, and because he had always, all his life, reached for the word that might save him. She did not let him say it. She turned around. She walked out of the living room. She walked past the dining room and past the bedroom and past the kitchen where his father's pistol was lying on the marble island. And at the front door, Marco was still standing with his shoulder against the wall. And when she appeared in the hallway, he straightened up and opened the door for her without speaking. She walked out of the apartment. The 2 men in the hallway looked at her. Miss Vale, we're leaving. The doors are unlocked. You can pack up. Thank you for tonight. Yes, Miss Vale. She walked to the elevator. Marco and Tomas walked behind her. She did not look back. She did not look back at the apartment door, and she did not look back at the 42nd floor of the Verona Tower, and when the elevator doors opened and she stepped inside, she did not look at her own reflection in the mirrored panels. She stood very still with her hands folded in front of her, and she rode down 42 floors, and when the doors opened in the lobby, Hector the doorman was standing at his post in his uniform. He had just come on shift. It was 5:30 in the morning. He saw her. His face did something complicated. She stopped. She walked over to him. Hector. Mrs. He stopped. He did not know what to call her. Miss Vale. Miss Vale. Hector. I want to thank you for something. He looked confused. Ma'am, I lived in this building for 3 years. You held the door for me every morning and every night. You called me ma'am, and you called my husband sir, and you asked after my health when it rained, and you never once in 3 years made me feel smaller than the people who came in behind me. I noticed. I just want you to know I noticed. His eyes filled up. He was a man in his 50s. He had stood in lobbies for a living since he was 19. And here was a woman at 5:30 in the morning telling him that she had seen him. Miss Vale. Yes, Hector. I am very sorry, ma'am, for whatever. You have nothing to be sorry for, Hector. You were the kindest man in this building. Please believe me when I tell you that I mean that. He nodded. He could not speak. She reached into her coat. She pulled out an envelope. She had prepared the envelope the day before. It contained a great deal of money in clean new bills, and it contained the address and phone number of a very good private school in a small town 80 miles outside the city, and a note, written in her own hand, that said, "For your grandson." She handed it to him. "This is for your family, Hector." Miss Vale, I can't. You can. You will. Please. He took the envelope. He held it in both hands, very carefully, as if it were something breakable. Thank you, Miss Vale. Thank you, Hector. Have a good morning. She walked out of the Verona Tower and into the cold, white morning, and Tomas was already waiting with the back door of the Lincoln open. And she got in, and she closed the door behind her, and the car pulled away from the gold canopy, and she did not look back at the building, not once, not then, not ever. They drove out of the city as the sun came up. The snow on the streets had begun to turn gray. Iris sat with the blanket across her knees and her face turned toward the window. And after about 40 minutes, she closed her eyes, and after about another 40 minutes, she slept. She slept all the way to the first roadside diner on the highway north, and when Tomas pulled in for coffee and eggs, she woke up, and she got out of the car with him and Marco, and the three of them sat in a red vinyl booth by the window and ate breakfast in silence. And a waitress who looked about 60 called her Honey, and Iris Vale, who had not been called Honey by a stranger since a rainy night in a coffee shop on Marwell Avenue 9 weeks ago, smiled at the waitress, a real small, quiet smile, and she said, "Thank you, ma'am. That's very kind." Bomb. They drove the rest of the way home with the radio on low, tuned to a country station Tomas liked. Outside the windows, the snow on the fields got deeper and deeper as they moved north, until it was unbroken in every direction. And Iris Vale, in the back seat, watched the white go by, and she did not think about Ronan Vex, and she did not think about the apartment, and she did not think about the long, quiet work that was still in front of her. The signatures, the paperwork, the 90 days of careful unbuilding that would still have to happen between now and the end. She thought instead about her mother. She thought about a woman she could barely remember, a woman who had died when Iris was 9, a woman whose face she could only half call to mind and whose voice she had completely forgotten. She thought about what her father had said in the library, about how her mother would have written a letter. She thought about how somewhere in this life there had been a woman who had made her and raised her for 9 years and taught her without meaning to how to stand up straight in a room full of dangerous men. And she thought, for the first time in a great many years, that she might be ready, soon, to go and sit at her mother's grave for an hour and tell her what had happened and ask her, very quietly, whether she had done it right. The car moved north through the snow, and the morning got brighter, and somewhere in a city 1,500 miles behind her, in a dirty apartment on the 42nd floor of a building he would soon no longer live in, a man sat on a couch with his head in his hands and began, "Emilio Castana came to see Ronan Vex on a Tuesday morning, 6 days after Iris had walked out of the apartment. He came at 9 o'clock. He came alone. He was wearing a dark gray overcoat and a soft gray hat, and he carried a leather briefcase that had the quiet, worn look of a briefcase that had been carried to a great many meetings over the course of 30 years. He took the elevator to the 42nd floor. He rang the doorbell. He waited. Ronan opened the door. He had shaved. That was the first thing Emilio noticed. He had shaved badly, and he was wearing clean clothes, a white shirt, dark pants, socks, but no shoes, and his hair had been combed with water, and the apartment behind him, when Emilio stepped inside, had been cleaned. Not well, but cleaned. The bottles were gone from the coffee table. The dishes had been washed. Someone, probably Ronan himself, hour by slow hour, over the last 6 days, had tried to scrape together some small approximation of a functioning life. Mr. Vex. Mr. Castana. May I sit? Please. They sat at the dining room table. Ronan had set out 2 cups of coffee. Black, no cream. Emilio noticed that Ronan's hand when he reached for his own cup was not steady. He noticed that Ronan had lost weight. He noticed that the whites of Ronan's eyes had a yellow cast to them that had not been there the last time Emilio had seen him, at a charity dinner 18 months ago. Emilio opened his briefcase. He took out a stack of documents. He set them on the table between them. He did not speak for a moment. He simply watched Ronan look at the papers. Mr. Vex. Yes. I am going to walk you through these. I am not going to rush you. I am going to answer any question you want to ask. When we are finished, you will sign, and I will take the signed copies, and I will leave. This will be the only meeting you and I will ever have. Is that understood? Yes. Good. Emilio spread the papers out. He tapped the first stack. These are the shipping companies. 3 of them. You are signing over any remaining interest. There is no remaining interest of any financial value. You are not being asked to give up anything you still possess. You are being asked, in effect, to confirm that you no longer possess it. Sign here, here, and here. Ronan signed. These, Emilio said, moving to the second stack, are the nightclubs. The Aperture is already in receivership. The Wicker will follow within the month. The 2 smaller clubs on 14th and on Prospect are being quietly absorbed by a holding company that I will not name, but that you may, if you wish, assume is friendly to my employer. Sign here, here, and here. Ronan signed. These, Emilio said, are the personal holdings, real estate primarily. The beach house in St. Anitz, the condo in Palm Vieja, the house your mother lives in Westbrook. That one will remain hers, Mr. Vex. I want to be clear. Your mother is not being punished. She will continue to live in her house. The title, however, will transfer from you to her directly and out of any entity in which you have an interest. Ronan looked up. My mother will be fine, Mr. Vex. She will not be contacted by anyone. She will not be approached. She will live out her life in her house, and when she passes, the house will go to whoever she leaves it to in her will. That is Miss Vale's specific instruction. I was asked to tell you that, word for word. Ronan looked down at the papers. His jaw worked for a moment. Tell her, Mr. Vex. Tell her thank you. Emilio looked at him. He did not answer for a moment. I will not be passing any messages, Mr. Vex. Not from you to her, and not from her to you. That is also a specific instruction. I am sorry. I understand. Sign here, 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 and here. Ronan signed. It went on for almost 3 hours. There were a great many documents. There were documents Ronan had not known existed. There were holdings he had forgotten he had, and there were holdings he had never known he had. And there were holdings whose existence Emilio explained to him patiently, line by line, in a voice that never once raised itself in judgment or sharpened itself in cruelty. Emilio Castana, Ronan realized somewhere around the 2nd hour, was not there to humiliate him. Emilio Castana was there to do paperwork. And Emilio Castana, unlike almost every other man Ronan had ever done business with, believed that paperwork should be done properly. When it was over, Emilio closed the briefcase. He stood up. He extended his hand across the table. Ronan looked at it. He had not expected that. A handshake. He had not expected that at all. He stood up. He shook Emilio's hand. Mr. Vex. Yes. A piece of advice, if I may. Yes. You are going to want, in the coming weeks, to reach out to Miss Vale. You are going to want to explain yourself to her. You are going to want, in some form, to apologize. You will not do it in any way she can hear. You will not write. You will not call. You will not send any messenger. Do you understand? I understand. If you feel the need to apologize, Mr. Vex, then I suggest you do it in your own head, silently, and then you let it go. That is the kindest thing you can do for her. It is also the kindest thing you can do for yourself. A man who keeps trying to apologize to a woman who has closed a door becomes, over time, a man who cannot do anything else. I have seen it. I do not want to see it in your case. Do you understand what I am telling you? Yes? Good. Emilio put on his hat. He walked to the door. He paused there. Mr. Vex? Yes. I knew your father a long time ago. He was not a good man. You should know that if you do not already. But he was a clear man. He knew what he was. He did not try to lie to himself about it. That is a rarer quality than you might think. I hope that in the years ahead, Mr. Vex, you find yourself able to develop it. It is, in my experience, the only comfort available to men like us. He left. Ronan stood in the empty apartment for a long time. Then he walked back to the dining room table. He sat down. He put his head in his hands. He did not cry. He had, it seemed, finally run out of that. He just sat there with his elbows on the polished wood of a table Iris had picked out in the first year of their marriage, and he thought, for the first time in his adult life, about his father. About what kind of man his father had really been. About the things his father had done in rooms Ronan had not been allowed into as a boy, that had built the life Ronan had inherited and then, somehow, in 3 short years, managed to lose. He thought about it for a long time. Then he stood up, and he went to the kitchen, and he made himself a sandwich. He had not eaten a real meal in 9 days. The sandwich was nothing special. Bread, butter, a slice of turkey, a slice of cheese. He ate it standing at the counter. It was the best meal he had ever tasted. The 90 days ran like a river after that. Iris did not involve herself in the details. She did not need to. Emilio and Sophia and her father's men handled every stage of what came next, with a thoroughness and a quiet discipline that did not require her supervision. Each morning, she came down to the library, and Emilio would give her a brief summary of the previous day's work, and she would listen. And she would nod, and she would ask 1 or 2 questions, and then she would release him to continue. The dismantling moved over those 90 days through every single piece of Ronan Vex's former life. The freight companies, the nightclubs, the 2 restaurants, the construction firm on the south side, the shell company in Delaware, the personal accounts, the real estate, the stakes in the 2 professional sports franchises that nobody had ever known he had. The quiet ownership interest in a cosmetics company his mother had invested in 30 years ago, which he had inherited and done nothing with. The gym on the east side. The 4 apartment buildings that had been in the family for 2 generations. The penthouse at the Verona Tower, lease terminated for cause and confirmed by the building manager, who delivered the notice in person on the 17th of December with a small apology that Ronan accepted without argument. By the 15th of January, Ronan Vex had precisely nothing. He had, specifically, the contents of a single bank account in his mother's name that his mother had quietly opened for him 2 days before Christmas, and into which she had moved $22,000 of her own savings. He had a small apartment in a neighborhood he had never been to before in his life, a 1-bedroom on the 2nd floor of a walk-up building with no elevator, rented under an assumed name that Emilio had helpfully suggested. He had his clothes. He had his father's pistol, unloaded, still lying on the counter of the new apartment's small kitchen because he had not yet decided what to do with it. And he had, somewhat to his surprise, his mother. Anna Vex was 73 years old. She had not spoken to her son in 6 weeks, ever since a phone call in early December during which she had told him, very quietly, that she was ashamed of him. She had not shouted. She had not thrown things. She had simply said the sentence, and then she had said goodbye, and she had hung up, and she had not answered when he called back. On the 20th of January, she called him. Ronan. Mama. I made soup. Mama. Come for dinner, 6 o'clock. He came. They did not talk about any of it. They did not talk about the freight companies or the nightclubs or the ex-wife or the mistresses or the collapse. They ate the soup. They watched a game show on the television in the kitchen. At 9 o'clock, his mother kissed him on the forehead the way she had when he was a boy, and she sent him home. and he drove back to his small apartment in a used Toyota that one of Emilio's men had arranged for him to buy at a very reasonable price. And he lay on his narrow bed and stared at the ceiling, and he understood somewhere in the middle of the night that he was, in the end, going to survive. It was not a relief. It was not exactly anything, but it was a fact. And it was a fact he had not, 3 weeks ago, been certain of. At Holloway Ridge, the winter deepened. The snow came up to the second step of the porch. The pond at the edge of the property froze over. Iris, in the mornings, took long walks in heavy boots and a wool coat that had belonged to her mother, and in the afternoons she sat in the library and worked. In the evenings, she ate dinner with her father. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they did not. Rosa fed them roasted chickens and root vegetables from the root cellar and dark bread that she baked herself on Saturdays. Iris was no longer thin. Her hair had come back. Her hands had stopped trembling at odd hours. Adrian Cade came for dinner twice in January. The first time he stayed for 3 hours. They talked about things that were not their families and not the work and not their future together. They talked about a book she had been reading. They talked about a horse he had once owned. They talked about the particular way the light looked on the snow in the late afternoon. He did not touch her. He did not try. At the end of the evening, he shook her hand very formally at the door, and he drove away in the dark. The second time, at the end of the month, he came for lunch instead. They ate at the small round table in the sunroom at the back of the house. Rosa had made a pot pie. The sun came in through the glass in long, bright bars. Iris was wearing a soft gray sweater and her hair was down. And Adrian, across the table, looked at her for a long moment before he started eating. "What?" "Nothing." "Adrian, what?" "You look well." "I am well." "Good." He ate for a moment, then he put down his fork. "Iris?" "Yes." "My mother asked after you." "Your mother?" "Yes." "I have never met your mother." "I know." "She asked after me anyway." "She did." "What did you tell her?" He looked at her. He had gray eyes, she kept noticing. They did not change very much, regardless of what he was saying. They were very steady eyes. "I told her," he said, "that you were a woman who had come through something hard, and that you were still coming through it, and that if she wanted to meet you, she was going to have to wait until you were ready to meet her. I told her I did not know when that would be, and that I was not going to rush it. She did not like that answer." "Why not?" "Because she is 69 years old, Iris, and she has been waiting for grandchildren for a long time, and she has decided that you are the last chance at them that she is likely to get." Iris put down her fork. "Adrian, I'm not asking you for anything." "Adrian." "Iris, I'm not asking you for anything. I'm telling you what my mother said. I'm telling you because I promised you in a hotel in Geneva 8 years ago that I would never try to make you do anything in this arrangement by stealth. I am telling you because I would rather you know." "Thank you." "You're welcome." They ate in silence for a moment. "Adrian?" "Yes." "Do you want children?" He looked at her for a long moment. He picked up his water glass. He took a sip. He set the glass down carefully. "Yes," he said. "I do." "I want to be honest with you about something." "All right." "I don't know if I do. I used to, before Ronan. I used to assume I would have them, 2 or 3. I had, the whole little fantasy, names and bedrooms and the kind of birthday parties. Then I was married to him for 3 years, and I watched, very slowly, the part of me that wanted to bring children into a life like that, just close up, like a hand closing. And I don't know, Adrian, whether it is going to open again. I don't know. I am telling you, because I think you deserve to know that there is a version of our marriage where we do not have children. I don't know yet if that version is the one that is going to happen, but it is possible. And I want you to understand that before we take any more steps toward each other. He listened to the whole thing. He did not interrupt. "Iris." "Yes." "I understand." "Adrian, I understand. I hear what you're telling me. I will tell you something in return, and then we can stop talking about it for today. All right, if you and I get to the end of our lives, and we have not had children, and we have had a good marriage, a real one, a quiet one, a kind one, I will consider it a life well spent. I would like to have children. I am telling you honestly, but I would like to have a good life more than I would like to have children. And I know the difference between the two, Iris. I have seen men reverse them. I have watched men spend their whole lives trying to fill a house with children and still die unhappy, because the problem was never the number of children. I am not going to be one of those men. How do you know you won't? Because I'm 35 years old and I have lived long enough to watch a lot of men make mistakes, and I have learned the only thing that has ever been worth learning, which is pay attention to what you already have. That's it. That's all of it. Pay attention to what you already have. I would like, Iris, to have you. If we have a child, that is more. If we do not, that is what we already had. I will not be unhappy about it. She did not answer. She looked down at her plate. Iris. Yes. Are you crying? A little. All right, take your time. She took her time. He picked up his fork. He ate for a while in silence. He did not look at her while she cried. He let her have her face to herself. Adrian. Yes. I'm going to need another year. All right. I don't want you to wait for me for another year. It's not fair. It's not... Iris. Yes. I'm waiting for you. That's what I'm doing. That is what this is. I have been waiting, in some form, for 8 years. A year is not the question it would be for another man. Stop apologizing. All right. Eat your pot pie. She ate her pot pie. After a while, the light in the sunroom went gold, and Rosa came in with a pot of tea, and Adrian Cade asked her politely about her recipe for the crust. And Rosa, who had approved of Adrian Cade since the second time he came to dinner, but who had been pretending, out of a long-standing personal philosophy, not to approve of him yet, allowed herself to smile, just a little, as she poured the tea. On the 1st of February, Iris drove into town with her father and they visited her mother's grave. The cemetery was small. It was attached to the old parish church in the nearest village, a stone building with a green copper roof and a low wall around the graveyard, and the walk from the car to the grave was maybe 100 yards through deep snow. Iris wore her mother's coat. Her father wore a black overcoat and a black hat and a wool scarf that Rosa had given him for his 60th birthday 12 years ago. Her mother's grave was under an old oak tree. The tree had lost its leaves. The branches made a dark gray shape against the gray sky. Iris stood at the foot of the grave for a long time. Her father did not stand beside her. He stood back, about 10 feet away, with his hands folded in front of him, and he gave her her space. She did not speak out loud. She did not need to. She simply stood there, in her mother's coat, with the wind moving very lightly through the empty branches above her head, and she told her mother silently, in her own head, everything that had happened. She did not leave anything out. She told her about Ronan. She told her about Celeste. She told her about the coffee shop on Marwell Avenue and the night in the dining room with the osobuco and the long quiet drive out of the city at 4:15 in the morning. She told her about the week of sleep and the map on the wall of the library. She told her about Emilio and his hat. She told her about Hector the doorman. She told her about Adrian Cade. She told her about the pot pie. She stood there for almost 40 minutes. When she was done, she reached into her coat pocket. She pulled out a small object she had been carrying for 9 weeks. It was the photograph of her mother that she had kept hidden during her marriage inside a hollowed-out book. It was bent at the corners. It had been handled many times. It showed a woman with dark hair and unflinching eyes, standing in a garden in summer, holding a small girl on her hip. Iris looked at the photograph for a long moment. Then she knelt down in the snow. She put the photograph face up at the base of the headstone. She took off one glove, and with her bare hand she pressed the photograph into the snow, and she pressed the snow gently over the edges of it so that it would not blow away. Goodbye, Mama. She stood up. She put her glove back on. She turned and walked back through the snow to her father. He did not say anything. He took her arm. They walked back to the car together, slowly, and they drove home in silence, and when they got back to Holloway Ridge, Rosa had lit every fire in the house. Iris went up to her room. She sat on the edge of her bed. She looked at her hands, the one that had been bare, and she understood that she had, in some small, quiet way, put something down today that she had been carrying for 22 years. She did not feel light. She did not feel healed. She felt, more than anything, honest. She lay back on the bed and she looked at the ceiling and she thought, for no particular reason, about a very small boy in Geneva 8 years ago who had asked her to dance, and she smiled, slightly, alone in her room, and the smile, when it came, surprised her. It was not a smile she recognized. It belonged to some other version of her that was, apparently, beginning to come back. On the 12th of February, a letter arrived at the house. It had been sent not to Holloway Ridge, but to an address in the city, a P.O. box that Sophia Renzulli maintained for certain kinds of correspondence, and Sophia had, as usual, screened the envelope before bringing it up to the Ridge. It was a plain white envelope, with no return address, and the handwriting on the front was bad, the handwriting of a man who had not written a letter in many years, and who was out of practice. Iris was in the library when Sophia brought it in. "Miss Vale?" "Yes, Sophia. This came this morning." "From who?" "I believe it is from Mr. Vex." Iris looked at the envelope. "Is there anything else in it? Anything that shouldn't be in it?" "No, Miss Vale. I had it checked. It is only a letter." "Leave it on the desk." Sophia put the envelope on the desk. She left. Iris looked at the envelope for a long time. She did not open it for 2 days. On the second day in the evening, she was alone in the library, and she had eaten dinner, and she had a glass of red wine on the desk beside her, and she reached for the envelope, and she turned it over in her hands. She did not know why she was going to open it. Emilio had told her not to. Emilio had told Ronan not to send it. Adrian, if she had asked him, would have told her to burn it without reading it. She opened it anyway. There was one page inside. It was a lined page, torn from a cheap notebook. The handwriting was the same bad handwriting on the envelope. It said, "Iris, I have been told not to write to you. I am going to write to you anyway. I am not going to send any others after this one. I am writing this one because if I do not write it, I think it will stay inside me my whole life, and I will die with it still inside me. And I do not want to die with it still inside me. I am not asking you for anything. I am not asking you to write back. I am not asking you to forgive me. I understand that you will not forgive me, and I understand now that forgiveness was never something I was entitled to from you in the first place. I am writing to tell you that I heard you. When you came to the apartment that night and you told me those things, you said something I have been turning over in my head every day since. You said I was afraid of you. You said I hurt you because I was afraid of you, and I did not know I was afraid of you because I did not have the emotional literacy to know. I have been thinking about it. I think you were right. I think I was afraid of you from the first month we were married. I did not know it. I would not have been able to say it. But I think you were right. I think I looked at you and I saw someone bigger than me, and I did not know how to be married to someone bigger than me, because no man in my family ever taught me how to be married to a woman who was bigger than he was. My father was not married to a woman who was bigger than he was. My grandfather was not married to a woman who was bigger than he was. You were the first woman I had ever been close to who was bigger than me, and I did not know what to do, and so I did the worst thing, which was I tried to cut you down to my size. I could not cut you down. I am writing to say I should have let you be big. I should have let you be bigger than me. I should have been proud that I was married to a woman who was bigger than me. I was not proud. I was scared. I am sorry. I am not asking you to care that I'm sorry. I am just writing it because it has been inside me for a very long time, and I want to put it outside me where it can do less damage. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. I know you know that. I want you to know that I know it too, now. Goodbye, Iris. Ronan. She read the letter twice. Then she folded it in half, and she folded it in half again, and she got up from the desk and walked to the fireplace, and she put the letter into the fire. The flames took it quickly. The paper curled and went black and then gray and then nothing, and by the time she had walked back to her chair, there was nothing left of it at all. She sat down. She picked up her glass of wine. She looked out the window. The moon was up over the ridge. The snow on the grounds was very blue in the moonlight. She did not feel sorry for him. That had not come back, and she did not expect it to. But she felt, for perhaps the first time, that the account was closed, that whatever had been owed between them in either direction had been paid. She had taken everything he had, and he, in his small, late way, had given her the only thing he had left to give, which was the admission that she had been right. It was not a clean ending. There were no clean endings, she understood now. There were only endings. She lifted her glass. She did not toast anything. She drank. Then she set the glass down, and she picked up her pen and she got back to work. Sophia had left a folder on the desk earlier in the day, a new project, unrelated to Ronan Vex, a long and careful strategy about a shipping contract in the southern ports that her father had asked her to look at. And Iris Vale opened the folder and she began quietly to read. The shipping contract in the southern ports took Iris 11 weeks to unwind. It was not a dramatic piece of work. There were no confrontations. There were no late-night phone calls. There were instead hundreds of small, steady hours at her grandfather's desk, with Sofia Renzulli beside her and Emilio Castana in and out of the room with coffee and folders. And at the end of the 11 weeks, the Vale family owned, on paper and in practice, 38% of the long-haul freight capacity on the southern coast. It was the largest move Darius Vale had made in 9 years. It was his daughter who had made it. The night they closed the last piece, her father walked into the library, and he looked at the map on the wall, and he put his hand flat against it for a long moment, and he said, without turning around, "Piccola, Papa, I'm going to retire." She set down her pen. "When? When you are ready." "Papa, not tomorrow, Iris, not even this year probably, but sometime. Sometime in the next few years. I'm going to retire, and I am going to move out to the cabin at Mason's Lake, and I am going to fish, and I am going to drink bad coffee, and I am going to read the books I have been meaning to read for 30 years and never have. And you are going to run this house, you and Adrian, and whoever you choose to keep around you. That is what is going to happen." "Papa, I have been watching you for 6 months, Iris. You are better at this than I was at your age. You are better at it than I am now. I'm not saying this to flatter you. I do not flatter people. I'm saying it because it is true, and because I have reached a point in my life where I would like to say true things out loud and see how they sound in the room." She did not know what to say to him. He turned around. He looked at her. He was a tall man. He had always been a tall man. But tonight, in the yellow light of the library, he looked, for the first time in her memory, like a man who had decided he was done carrying something he had carried for a very long time. "Papa, sit down." He sat down. "You are not sick." "I am not sick, Iris." "You would tell me. I would tell you." "All right. I am 67 years old. I would like to have some years at the end of my life when I am not holding a thing in both hands. That is all. I have held a thing in both hands since I was 23 years old. I would like, before I die, to put it down and see what the world looks like when I am not holding it." "Papa?" "Yes." "Okay. Okay." She got up. She walked around the desk. She did something she had not done in a long time. She sat down on the arm of his chair, and she put her hand on top of his head, the way he used to put his hand on top of hers. His hair was very white. It was soft, she noticed, the way the hair of older men gets soft, as if the years had taken some of the weight out of it. He did not speak for a moment. Then he reached up and he put his hand over hers, and he squeezed it, once, hard, and he let go. "Mason's Lake," she said. "Mason's Lake. You always hated fishing." "I know I did. I have decided to learn to love it." She laughed. It was a small laugh, and a tired one, and it surprised her because she had not thought she had a laugh like that in her anymore. He smiled up at her. "Go to bed, Piccola," he said. "We have a long year." Bummed. The wedding was in September. It was not a large wedding. Adrian had not wanted a large wedding, and Iris, who had already had one large wedding in her life that had not deserved the scale it had been given, wanted this one to be small. They were married at the old parish church in the village, with 60 people in the pews, and the flowers in her hand had been cut that morning from Rosa's kitchen garden, and the dress she wore had belonged to her grandmother, and had been taken in by Rosa's hands over the course of 2 weeks of careful, quiet work in the sewing room at the back of the house. Her father walked her down the aisle. He did not cry. Iris had expected, if she was being honest with herself, that he would not. Darius Vale had not cried in her presence in her entire adult life. And he was not going to start on a Saturday afternoon in the middle of September, not even for his only daughter's wedding. But when they reached the altar, he did something he had never done before. He stopped. He turned to her. He lifted her veil with both hands, very carefully, the way a man lifts something that he is afraid to damage, and he looked at her face. "Piccola," he said. "Papa, your mother would have cried today." "I know." I'm not going to cry because I promised her the night before she died that I would be the strong one after she was gone. But I want you to know, Iris, that today is the day I would have cried the hardest. Papa, I love you. I love you too. He kissed her on the forehead. He stepped back. He sat down in the front pew beside Rosa, who was already weeping openly into a handkerchief the size of a small flag. Iris turned to face Adrian. He was standing at the altar in a dark gray suit. His hair had been cut. He had, she noticed with a small private smile, tried to shine his own shoes that morning and had not quite gotten the left one right. His mother was in the second row, a small, sharp woman with Adrian's gray eyes, and she was watching Iris with an expression that was not quite approval and not quite disapproval, but was, more than anything, careful. The careful, waiting expression of a woman who had decided to reserve her final judgment until she saw how this daughter-in-law behaved over the course of the next 10 or 15 years. Iris liked her immediately. The ceremony was short. The priest was an old man who had baptized Iris when she was 4 weeks old and who had, over the course of 31 years, watched her grow up from the altar rail without ever once asking a question about her family's business that he did not need to know the answer to. He spoke briefly, without flourishes. He said the words that were required. When it was time, he looked at Adrian. "Do you take this woman?" "I do." And he looked at Iris. "Do you take this man?" She looked at Adrian. He was looking at her with steady gray eyes. He was not smiling. He was not performing. He was simply standing in front of her, a man who had, somewhere in the last year, become the first man in her adult life who had never tried to make her smaller than she was. "I do," she said. That was it. They walked out of the church into the afternoon sun. Rice, not confetti. Adrian's mother threw the first handful, hard, and laughed like a much younger woman. The reception was at Holloway Ridge. Rosa had spent 2 months on the food. There were 6 courses. There was a band that played slowly and well, and there was a dance floor that had been set up on the lawn under a canopy of string lights. And at some point in the evening, when the sun had gone down and the grounds were blue and the lights had come on, Iris stood with a glass of champagne at the edge of the dance floor and watched her father dance with Rosa. Rosa was laughing. She was laughing the way women laugh when they are 68 years old, and a man they have known for 40 years has finally, for the first time, pulled them onto a dance floor. Darius was not a good dancer. He had never been. He was leading too firmly, and he was stepping on her feet, and Rosa was correcting him quietly, the way a woman corrects a man she has loved for longer than either of them has admitted. And he was letting her correct him. Iris watched for a long time. Emilio came up beside her. He had a glass of wine in his hand. He had already loosened his tie. "Iris? Emilio? A good evening. A good evening." They watched her father and Rosa dance for a moment without speaking. "Emilio?" "Yes." "How long?" "How long what?" "How long have those two—" "Iris, I am a lawyer, not a gossip. I do not speculate about the private lives of my employers." She looked at him. He was smiling, very faintly, into his wine glass. "Emilio." "Yes." "How long?" He took a sip of his wine. He did not look at her. "Approximately 18 years, he said. 18 years. Approximately. And nobody ever— It was not a secret, Iris. It was simply a thing your father did not talk about. There is a difference. A secret is something you are hiding. A private matter is something you are choosing, out of respect for the people involved, not to discuss. Your father has always, in my observation, understood the difference. So has Rosa. Iris looked at her father. He had figured out the foxtrot. He was smiling down at Rosa. Rosa was saying something in Italian, fast, and he was laughing. Iris had not heard her father laugh in almost a year. "Emilio." "Yes." "Tell my father if he asks that I already knew." "Did you already know?" "No." "Then why am I telling him you did?" "Because I would like my father, for the rest of his life, to believe that his daughter is the kind of woman who noticed." Emilio looked at her. He raised his glass to her very slightly. "Yes, Iris," he said. "I will tell him you noticed." She walked away from him, across the lawn, toward the dance floor. They honeymooned for 3 weeks on the coast of a country whose name Iris did not tell anyone but Rosa. Rosa kept the secret without being asked. When they came home, the leaves had turned and the first frost had come. And Iris walked back into the library at Holloway Ridge and sat down at her grandfather's desk. And Sophia Renzulli looked up from the ledger she had been working on, and she said without greeting, "Miss Vale, we have work." "What kind of work?" "The southern ports again. There has been movement." "Good movement or bad?" "Interesting movement." Iris took off her coat. "Tell me," she said. The year that followed was, in most visible respects, uneventful. That is the part that surprised her. She had expected, after the collapse of Ronan Vex, that her life would become a constant series of fires, that there would always be another man, another organization, another problem, that the work she had done in those 90 days would have created, among the other families of the country, a kind of permanent wariness that she would spend the rest of her life managing. And there was some of that, a great deal of it, in the first year. Meetings in unfamiliar cities, handshakes with men who watched her face too carefully, the long, slow work of being, in her father's world, a new thing. Not a man's daughter, not a man's wife, but a woman with a name of her own. She did that work. She did it with Emilio at her right hand and Sophia at her left. And she did it with Adrian when she needed him, behind her. And it was hard, and it took time. And by the second year, it had mostly settled into the normal rhythm of a life. Adrian traveled. He had his own business to run. He was gone for 3 days at a time, sometimes a week. When he came home to Holloway Ridge. They had agreed very early in the marriage that they were not going to keep 2 houses. They were going to live in her father's house, and when her father retired to Mason's Lake, Holloway Ridge would become theirs. And the house would go on being what it had always been, which was the quiet heart of the family. She did not have a child that year. She did not have one the year after that either. It was not, in the end, a conversation they had to have twice. Adrian did not ask. He simply watched her over the course of the 2 years, and at the end of the second year, one evening in the garden, he looked at her across the small wrought iron table where they were having their tea, and he said, "Iris." "Yes." "Are you ever going to want it?" "I don't know." "All right." Adrian. "Iris. I'm not closing the door on it forever. I just want you to know I'm not. But I also am not opening it yet. I keep waiting for the part of me that closed to open back up, and it hasn't, and I am beginning to suspect that it might not. I am telling you now because it has been 2 years, and I said I would be honest with you, and I am trying to be honest with you." "All right. I am sorry." "Iris." "Yes. Do not apologize to me for the shape of you. I married the shape of you. I did not marry a promise." She looked at him across the table. She reached across and took his hand. "All right," she said. They did not talk about it again for a long time. On a Thursday in April of the 3rd year, Iris got a phone call from a woman she had not heard from in almost 3 years. "Iris? Celeste. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to call. How did you get this number?" "The same woman. The same one who gave me the other number. She gave me this one 3 weeks ago. She came up to me in a grocery store. She said if I ever needed to reach you, this was the one. I don't know who she is, Iris. I have never known who she is. She works for me." "Oh, what is it, Celeste?" There was a pause on the line. "Iris, Ronan is dead." Iris sat down. She had not known she was standing. She had been in the library, on her feet, by the window. And when Celeste said the words, her knees understood something that the rest of her had not yet caught up to, and she sat down slowly in her chair. "When?" "Yesterday morning. I just found out an hour ago. I didn't know who to tell. We were not. I hadn't seen him in 3 years. I had not seen him once. But his mother called me. I do not know why she called me. She called me and she told me and she cried on the phone for 20 minutes and then she hung up. And I did not know what to do, Iris. I did not know what to do." "How?" "His heart. In his apartment. His mother had been trying to reach him since Tuesday. The neighbor found him. I did not ask for details. I did not want them." Iris closed her eyes. "Celeste." "Yes." "Are you all right?" "I don't know." "Celeste." "I don't think I am, Iris. I don't think I am all right. I did not love him. I want to be clear. I was not in love with him. You asked me that once, and it is still true. I was not in love with him, but I knew him. And now he is dead, and I am the only person outside his mother who knows it, and I do not know what to do with that." "How old was he?" 39. Iris opened her eyes. She looked at the window. The light on the grounds was the long, slow gold light of late afternoon. A crow was sitting on the stone wall at the edge of the property, and as she watched, it lifted off, silently, into the blue. "Celeste?" "Yes." "Are you working?" "I'm a manager at a bakery in Westbrook. I left the city 2 years ago. I have a normal life now, Iris. I wanted you to know I am not who I was." "I know. I did not come to you for anything. I want you to know that. I am not calling to ask you for anything." "Celeste?" "Yes." "Is there anybody in your life?" "In my life, how?" "A man, a woman, a friend, a sister, anybody who can come over to your apartment tonight and sit with you. I do not want you to be alone tonight." There was a long pause. "My sister lives upstairs. Call her, have her come down, eat something together, watch a bad movie, go to sleep before midnight. Do you hear me, Celeste?" "Yes." "Goodbye, Celeste." "Iris, yes." "Thank you. I don't know for what, but thank you." Iris hung up. She sat at the desk for a long time without moving. The crow did not come back. The light in the garden got longer and redder. At some point, Sophia walked into the library, saw her face, and walked out again without speaking. That was a thing Sophia had learned to do over the years. It was one of the many reasons she was still in that house. Iris sat there until the light was gone. When Adrian came home at 7, she was still there. She had not turned on the lamp. She was sitting in the dark. He came into the library and he saw her, and he did not ask. He walked across the room and turned on the small lamp on the side table, and then he walked over to her, and he knelt down beside her chair, and he took her hand. "Iris? He's dead." "Who?" "Ronan." He did not say anything. "Heart attack. In his apartment. He was 39. Adrian did not say he was sorry. He did not say she should be at peace now. He did not offer any of the small useless sentences that other men would have offered. He simply held her hand and he looked at her face and he waited. After a long moment, she said, "I don't know what I feel." "I know. I thought if I ever heard this news, I would feel something. I thought I would feel, I don't know, triumphant, relieved, something, and I don't. I don't feel anything, Adrian, and that is almost worse, because it means in some way that I had already finished him in my head years ago, and this is just the body catching up with the fact." "Iris?" "Yes." "That's not nothing. What you just said, that's not nothing you're feeling." "What is it?" "That's grief." "Grief. Of a kind. Not the kind other people would expect you to feel. But you lived with him for 3 years, Iris. You were married to him. You don't get to walk away from 3 years of your life without there being a shape in you where those 3 years used to live. And when the man who filled that shape dies, even if the shape is already empty, the shape notices. That's all. That's what you're feeling." She looked at him. "Adrian." "Yes. I would like you to come to bed with me." "All right? Not for anything. I just want you next to me." "All right, Iris." They went up the stairs together. She did not cry. She did not, in the end, feel anything large. She lay in the dark with her husband's hand on her back, and she thought, for a long time, about a man she had watched dance with a girl in a red coat in the back seat of a car on a rainy night in a city she had not lived in for almost 4 years. She thought about him the way you think about a house you used to live in. Not fondly, not bitterly, just as a place that had once contained some piece of you and that no longer did. She fell asleep around midnight. In the morning, she got up and she made coffee and she went back to work. What? Darius Vale retired in the spring of the 4th year. He had waited longer than he had meant to. He had found, as many men in his position find, that the retiring part was harder than the deciding to retire part. But in the end, he packed up his books and he loaded them into the back of Tomas's Lincoln, and he drove up to Mason's Lake on a Tuesday morning in May with Rosa in the passenger seat and a small pile of fishing rods in the trunk that he had bought on a catalog 2 weeks earlier, and had not yet figured out how to assemble. Before he left, he stood on the porch of Holloway Ridge with Iris. He did not give her a speech. He had never been a speech giver, and he was not going to start now. He simply stood with her on the porch, the same porch where he had waited for her on the night she had come home, and he put his hands in his pockets and he looked out at the grounds. Piccola, Papa, do not run this place the way I ran it. How should I run it? Better. You will figure out how. I'm not going to tell you, because if I tell you, you will try to make me proud, and that is not a good reason to do anything. Okay, Papa. Iris? Yes. Call me sometimes. I will, Papa. Not every week. That would be too much. But sometimes. Sometimes. He nodded. He walked down the porch steps. He got into the Lincoln. Rosa waved from the passenger seat, and Iris waved back, and the car pulled slowly down the gravel drive, and Iris stood on the porch of her house until the car had disappeared around the bend. She stood there for a long time after it was gone. When she went back inside, the house was very quiet. Not in a bad way. In a new way. The quiet of a house that had just become, for the first time, entirely hers. She walked to the library. She sat down at her grandfather's desk. She picked up the pen. They had the child in the 6th year. A girl. Iris had not in the end decided to want her in the way other women wanted their children. The door had not opened again. Not in the way she had once thought it might. It had simply, one day in the winter of the 5th year, become clear to her that if she was going to do this thing, she was going to do it, and if she was not, she was not. She had turned to Adrian at breakfast one morning and said, "Adrian?" "Yes." "I have been thinking about a child." He had set down his coffee cup very slowly. "Iris, I am not promising you anything. I'm not promising I will love it the way mothers in books love their children. I do not know how to do that. I had a mother for 9 years. I remember her in pieces. I do not know, Adrian, if I have in me the thing you are supposed to have. But I have been thinking, and I would like, if you still want it, to try. I would like to bring one child into this house. I would like to see if I am better at it than I am afraid I am. I would like to try." He had sat for a long time. Then he had reached across the breakfast table, and he had put his hand over hers. "Iris." "Yes." "You are going to be better at it than you are afraid you are." "How do you know?" "Because I have watched you be afraid of things before." The girl was born in late August. She had Iris's dark hair and Adrian's gray eyes, and an expression on her small creased face of such unblinking attention from the very first hour that Rosa, who had driven down from Mason's Lake the moment the call came, took one look at her and began, quietly, to weep. "Mija. Rosa. This is your mother's face." "I know." "This is your mother's face, Iris. Look at her. Look at her. This is exactly your mother's face." They named her Lucia. When he finally looked up, his eyes were wet. They were not, he would insist later, and for the rest of his life, tears. He would call them, whenever the question came up, a reaction to the dry air in the room. But they were wet, and Iris saw them, and she did not say anything about it. That was what she had been taught. That was what love in her father's house had always looked like, knowing when to see and knowing when to pretend not to have seen. "Piccola. Papa. You did good." "Thank you, Papa." "Your mother would be—" "I know, Papa." "She would be." "I know." He handed the baby back to her. He stood up slowly because his knees had begun to bother him in the last year. He walked to the door. He paused. "Iris." "Yes." "Be better at it than I was." "Papa, you are going to be better at it than I was. I am telling you, you are already better at it than I was. I watched you today. You did not even know I was watching. You are better at it than I was. That is all I came here to say." He left. Iris held her daughter, and she looked down at her and she thought, for no reason she could name, about a woman in a coffee shop on Marwell Avenue on a rainy Thursday night, almost 7 years ago, sitting alone at a small table with a cold cup of coffee in front of her, and her hands folded in her lap, and her whole life about to begin. She thought about the waitress who had asked her if she was okay. She thought about the cold, bitter sip she had taken and put down. She thought about the decision she had made quietly in that coffee shop, without tears, without drama, the decision simply to leave. She thought about how long it had taken, after that decision, for her life to become this life. It had taken almost 7 years. It had taken every single thing she had been willing to spend. She looked down at her daughter. Her daughter was asleep, with one small fist pressed against her own cheek, an iris veil, no longer hiding, no longer surviving, no longer the quiet wife of a man who had not known who she was, whispered very softly to the top of her daughter's head the only thing she believed, in the end, she had learned in a life that had not been at all what she had expected it to be. Baby. The baby did not stir. Baby, listen to me. The world is going to want someday to make you smaller than you are. It is going to try. Do not let it. Not once. Not ever. Do you hear me? Not for love. Not for peace. Not even to spare somebody's feelings. You stay the size you are. You stay the size you are, and if somebody cannot hold you at that size, you let them go. Do you hear me, baby? The baby did not hear her. The baby was asleep. Outside the window, the late summer light was going slowly gold across the grounds. In the garden, Rosa was cutting flowers for the table. In the driveway, Adrian was talking quietly with Emilio about something Iris could not hear. Somewhere down by the stone wall, a dog was barking at something that was not there. The ordinary, patient afternoon of an ordinary, patient life, in a house that had taken her a very long time to come home to. Iris kissed the top of her daughter's head. She closed her eyes. She rested.